All right. Welcome back to the Data Wizard Day at Zuberling for the afternoon session. And one thing I missed out in the opening this morning is that big thanks to organizer of Zuberling and Chris and Pascal and many other people gave us this stage and to curate the whole day. And so just a quick rundown of what's going to happen this afternoon. We'll have around 3 talks, basically focusing on all kinds of data talks around the practice and solutions. And then we will have a Big Mac about all kinds of things around Uniswap. We'll have from the data scientist from Uniswap. And then Boxer will give us a opening data review that's going to be spicy, comparing Ethereum and Solana. So any enthusiastic debater about this to ecosystem, please stay on and try to join the conversation. We'll make it spicy. And then in the end, 4 p.m., we'll have a Ethereum data quiz, and please participate, and it will be fun historical and data questions, and yeah, you will see. And so the first talk to open up the afternoon session is from Sarah from Protocol Labs, and the talk will be around decentralized data storage, privacy, resilience, efficiency, and decentralization. Please welcome.
Cool. Thanks, Danning. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. Have met some of you. If not, hi. My name is Sarah. Today, I'm going to be talking about the topic that Danning introduced. So I was kind of brainstorming, a little bit of context. I was brainstorming with the people, where should decentralized storage come in? I think one thing I've realized in the past few days is the world of Filecoin IPFS, Arweave, Walrus, of decentralized storage is very different from the world of Ethereum infra L2 scaling needs for storage. Right now, a lot of it sits on more centralized Web2 framework platforms. I'll be interested to see how we can maybe connect the dots a little bit to give some ideas to people here in the room on how you want to build that out further. Okay. So a little bit about myself. I used to be DX lead at Protocol Labs, mostly for Filecoin Virtual Machine. I currently have my own team, which is part of the Protocol Labs network. So Protocol Labs is now a huge network of innovation. We have a bunch of companies and no single organization. So I still lead the developer experience chapter for the network. I've spent about 3 years in Web3, wrapping my head around decentralized storage, sovereign systems, as well as public goods. So a lot of this happens, as you know, in Web3, you kind of do 10 things at once. If you can, you do 30. I managed to do 3, so that's pretty good. So yes, I am happy to talk to anyone if you want to geek out a little bit more after this talk. Okay, so some goals that I'm going to run through today and what I hope to achieve with this talk for all of you. It's going to be a short talk, but I hope it sticks in your mind. The goals are to help you form your why on decentralized storage, how you can, why is it useful, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, for you to connect what you're doing today with decentralized storage and think about parking your data there. The second would be to provide a useful evaluation framework of how you can approach these storage options that I'll share with you in a bit, and some of these you might already know, and to give you some options that you can begin exploring today. Sounds good? Yeah? Awesome. Okay. So, why decentralized storage? In the world that I come from, which is more decentralized storage infra, decentralized storage is really, it's very aligned with the Web3 ethos. We look at centralized censorship resistance. So if you look over here, this white paper, IPFS, I'm sure. IPFS, guys, anyone? Great, okay. Most people use IPFS, we love it. This white paper, I think Juan told me he wrote it in New York in a really shitty apartment way back. So if you think that's a great piece of work, maybe find a really shitty apartment and sit there and sit there for 3 days. So that really came up because we wanted to combat censorship resistance, data sovereignty, how you can own your data yourself. IPFS does not include a blockchain, just to clarify for everyone. It is mostly P2P file sharing. So think of when you torrent a movie on whatever you use, I don't want to know. But that's kind of how IPFS works. And then we think about things like resilience of your data. So there was an outage a few weeks ago, 1 week ago on Google. How do you make sure that your data is replicated and resilient and doesn't disappear completely? We think about data sovereignty. So I was recently at Funding the Commons. If you look over here at this photo, I was at Funding the Commons SF in April, and they talked about how since inauguration in this administration in the US, about 10,000 web pages have since been deleted. So there are organizations like the Internet Archive trying to back all this up. And it might not seem important today, right now, but who knows in 5 to 10 years, if your data disappears, you have no way to track that history, you're not in charge of that decision, it's gonna hurt in some way. So it's really important to think about who owns your data. And then lastly, Web3 ideology. So on top of the useful factors mentioned here, of course in the ethos of things, Web3 is very much about all these things that I mentioned above. So I was recently at Protocol Berg as well this week. I think it was Atta from Shtaka Research was saying, he had this really interesting slide about, there was one point that stuck out to me of people use Web3 storage or they try to use decentralized storage because of public opinion in Web3. So sometimes we just want to follow the ethos, and even though it's a little bit less great today, we stick in it for the long run. So these are a few reasons as to why decentralized storage is important. I hope that resonates with all of you here. So I think what I'm realizing in the past week of coming to meet all the Zoo Berlin people, I think traditionally protocol labs in the Filecoin world has kind of been in our own bubble, and I think everyone kind of understands what it feels like. Web3, you can go pretty deep in rabbit hole, and it's hard to see outside of your world. I think today decentralized storage is very much applied to traditional use cases. So when I say that, I mean think Dropbox, YouTube streaming. We have options like, if you ever heard of LivePeer, where it's video streaming, yeah. Blue Sky applications, you wanna back up your data. Those use IPFS and Filecoin today. So those are some applications, but more traditional, right? But there is an opportunity that lies in applying it to Web3's priorities today. And for the Ethereum-focused crowd here, and I know some Solana people in the crowd too, when you think about L2 scaling, that is very much missing from the conversation. And again, it might not matter today, but it might matter about 10 years from now if your data suddenly disappears. If your Google Bigtable disappears and you don't have your data, it might hurt in the future. So let's think about how we can apply it to Web3 priorities. So I don't claim to be an expert. I'm also very new to Ethereum L2 scaling, but I did try to get a huge download. Thank you for everyone that had conversations with me and tried to teach me stuff. Here are some opportunities that I've been thinking about, and I'd love to talk more to people about them. But hearing from your conversations here, I think there are a few things we can think about. So why decentralized storage for Ethereum L2s and MEV today? So historical call data, state snapshots, those are going to be useful for maybe things like fraud proofs, rehydrating state, or maybe replaying simulations. So these are things that you can think about for L2 scaling. I think as of today, I'm not sure where this data sits, or maybe it's temporarily stored and then deleted afterwards. Maybe I think similar to blob storage that lasts for about 18 days and then it disappears. So even for blob context storage, could we store it somewhere that will then then allow you to support account abstraction, bundlers, and intents better? These are also some opportunities out there. And then around the topic of mempool transparency, right? If you want to have maybe dispute resolution, or as of today, I'm not sure if all mempool transactions are being stored for a long time, like MEV bundles, auction bids, and so on. Where do these get stored, and how long do they get stored for? If we can make it open and accessible to the public and make sure they're stored in a secure way, it also unlocks public analysis and also helps to improve the space in the long run. So that's something to think about as well. Lastly, I know PBS is a hot topic today. Could we think about open builder markets for PBS? Because I think right now blocks are formed in a black box, right? So you don't really see how they're being formed. Could we make that data transparent, and can it be more open to public analysis, public builder analysis? So these are some ideas. To give you an example too, I added this example here. I don't know if anyone has heard. Very different from Ethereum L2 scaling, but Solana has parked their entire ledger history on Filecoin. This was an effort that started last year. It's still ongoing to today. So that's a really big commitment from a major chain. And it does show the move of the ecosystem as these platforms improve in UX and reliability to rely more on Web3 systems rather than Web2 ones. So opening this up for thought and discussion, I may be totally wrong, but some ideas here, and please come talk to me about these. Cool. So I hope that sparks some interest from people on all the relevant topics that you've been talking about. So I'll introduce a framework for evaluating decentralized storage and some options. So if let's say you're approaching this space for the first time, some key things to think about. The first being privacy. So for example, I know Web3 privacy now is a new movement and also theme that has been gaining a lot of traction. Privacy was also talked about in the first day of Zoo Berlin, super hot topic. There was a really interesting tweet thread, if you haven't checked this out, where the question was asked to Vitalik, and he was like, if you think about it from a high level, you might think privacy doesn't matter at any stage of what you're trying to do today or the goals you're trying to fulfill. But once your data's out there, you never know when it's going to get used. So privacy is going to be something to think about. So when you store on decentralized storage, some platforms are fully public, immutable, can't change it. Some allow encryption before you store it onto those networks. So these are things to consider when you evaluate these options. The second being resilience. So how many replicas of your data are being stored? How reliable are these node operators? How are they incentivized to make sure that they don't get rid of your data, or that they guarantee that your data is being stored for a long time? So these are things to think about as well. I'll give the example of like the Google outage last week. A whole bunch of major apps were affected because a single centralized point had failure, right? And so that affects everything. It has wide ranging effects. So thinking about resilience of your data and the resilience of the platform is also going to be very important. So think about how your node operators are operating their nodes. And then there's efficiency, which is, efficiency, I think first thing that might come to your mind is probably cost. If you look at decentralized storage platforms today, they'll definitely sell you on cost. They'll be like, it's a fraction of the cost, maybe 5 times cheaper. For example, I think Filecoin is about 5 times cheaper than AWS for storing on certain kinds of storage, especially archival. But it's not just cost, it's also around UX and I think mostly UX. So if you think about storing data, can you retrieve that data? How fast can you store that data and how fast can you retrieve that data? Is it comparable to the apps that you use on your phone today? Can it come back that quickly? Is there a CDM backing it up? So do think very, very deeply about the cost and the UX that that platform offers to you. Lastly, decentralization. So the reason we want to move to storage is because it's decentralized and not so much centralized. So don't take a platform's word for it. Definitely go check out how governance happens on the platform. Is it a single team that's deciding the future forward? Because then that would be basically the same deal that we have in Web 2 today. Also think about not just the storage points where you're uploading your data to, but the gateways that you're retrieving your data from. Are those decentralized, and how, again, all these other points above, how are those managed? So all in all, these are 4 points that I would definitely consider that you use to evaluate your storage options. Oh, and also I included a snapshot here around S3 compatibility. So in case you didn't know, decentralized storage platforms like Aave, Storacha, these are a few data storage on-ramps. They do think really hard about how to make it seamless when you convert from your S3 API across to decentralized storage. So they are thinking about these things. Space is improving, but definitely do your homework and make sure that it's what you need today. Okay, so I'm not going to run through this whole table, but I wanted to give some options for decentralized storage. I did talk to some people here, and maybe some people are super new to the space. These are some options that have come up a few times. And yes, ChatGPT did generate this table for me, full disclosure. But it's not wrong, though. I did fact check most of it. So as I said, this is to give you a sense of when you evaluate your options. For example, privacy. Some might expect you to encrypt it before you upload it. Some might have native encryption. Do think about it. Some of them you can't even encrypt it at all, so that might not be for your use case. Resilience, again, think about what are the incentives that make your node operators that store your data guarantee that they will keep storing your data, and how many replicas of your data are being stored. How long are they being stored for? If the claim is that it's permanent, how is it being permanent for exactly how long? So for example, Aave says permanent, but it's actually 160 years. Great, serves most of our use cases, but what happens after 160 years? So these are things to think about too. Efficiency, so I mentioned cost here, but I also mentioned speed. So think about cost, speed, storage versus retrieval, what's available today. So I come from the Filecoin ecosystem, and we have always found retrieval to be a challenge. We are solving it by the end of this year, but we mostly have cold storage today. You can store your data, but it takes a long time to retrieve it. How can we allow you to do a fast storage and fast retrieval? So these are also options to really do your homework on. And then lastly, decentralization, check out the governance teams, whether it's DAO supported, whether it's a team a small team of stakeholders, how diverse is it? So think about those pieces too. So this is super high level, won't dive into all of this, but of course I'm around if you want to talk to me about it. But yeah, so these are some options for you to get started. So then the last question to you is, how will you build sovereign systems? And I think sovereign systems is a very useful term to apply here. Like we can talk from different parts of the Web3 stack. We can talk about the chain itself, we can talk about storage, we can talk about the front ends, but how do we build things that are fully sovereign from the whole stack through, right? I think that's the ultimate goal and really need to think deeply on how we can achieve that. So yeah, that's the question for you. And Tom Hardy, because that's always nice to have. Okay, and as a quick pitch, we have, if you are interested in this topic, Protocol Labs is hosting its first ever hackathon. It's called Modular Walls. It's already in action. The dates, it lasts all the way to 16 July, so you have you have a month to hack if you want. Price pool's 200K, so that's really pretty big. Key tracks, so why I was talking about sovereign systems, those are one of the key tracks that are coming up. We also have decentralized governance, economies and science, and lastly, AI and autonomous infrastructure. A lot of sponsors here, a few less sponsors here, which means it might be easier to win the prizes. You can combine all of them and win the top prizes as well. But do consider, if you are interested, come join our hackathon. We would love to have more L2 scaling type use cases, which we don't see very often, and we are super supportive of cross-chain today in the Protocol Labs network. So do come by and join the hack. And if you're interested, take a photo, scan the QR code. If not, you can definitely Google the hackathon name that I just mentioned. Yeah, so that's it. That's all from me. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah. Any questions? Kofi, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things that you mentioned that was very interesting to me was the idea around storing information that is very important to analyze but doesn't get held on Ethereum and L2 blockchains forever. So specifically things like mempool data and blob data. It made me think, how programmable is Filecoin? Because one of the advantages I could see of using decentralized storage to store these things instead of using a centralized provider was if there was some way that we could use smart contracts and bridges to have blob data automatically be stored in a decentralized storage facility, or mempool data like automatically get ported somewhere, as opposed to somebody indexing these things on Ethereum and then moving it into S3 and then moving it into Snowflake, and then we work with it there. It's like if there's some way of automating some of that, I think that then that becomes a data source that is a lot more interesting, because nobody would need to do as much maintenance on it and everybody would have access to it. So yeah, programmability.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I actually mean that not like, oh, it's a great question, but it's a really good question. So I saw a tweet on it the other day. But yeah, so how many of you here know that Filecoin has a virtual machine? Cool. So now more people today know that Filecoin has a virtual machine. It is fully EVM compatible. So we have interop bridges completely supported, like Axela, Sealer, we have those supported. Actually, Ava here in the room is the one in charge of bringing those integrations on. So we are constantly improving the DX experience. To your use case of can you port it over from Ethereum and then get it seamlessly stored on Filecoin? Yes. So I'll give a quick example. We've been working on something for about a year. It's called a cross-chain bridge, and so we have a smart contract sitting on any EVM compatible chain, and a smart contract sitting on Filecoin, and based on how you configure that smart contract, it could, your smart contract from your application, it could seamlessly pull the data, send an event to that smart contract, it sends it across Axela, sends it back to Filecoin, and gets stored, and then you get a proof of your deal back. I will definitely caveat that as of today, that's like cold storage, so think of like archival. Hot storage coming to Filecoin by end of this year, so that will definitely be added to the bridge as well, but it's possible.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you.
Awesome.
Any other questions from the room? Yes.
Yeah, I think decentralized storage has been around for like more than 10 years now. There was like Siacoin before. Yeah. So my question is, because there used to be like underutilization of total storage capacity of those protocols, and I don't know about the latest trends. So do you see any adoption there? Any? Yeah, it's about like the usage of the decentralized storage capacity. Yeah.
Yeah, so huge amount of capacity still, and I'll talk from the Filecoin experience because I don't really know how the capacity is being filled on other networks. Filecoin today has about, I think it's like 300 pips of data capacity on the network, so there's a huge amount of data available. I think we have about a good 50% or so committed, 70% committed. Out of that 70%, I think it's about 30% of it has data sitting on that committed capacity. And we're constantly onboarding more institutional data is a huge source for us, so that takes up a lot of data space. I think the Solana piece definitely added to a big chunk of that data being used as well. But that gives you a sense of what capacity you have in the network and how much more there is to fill. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And yeah, let's.
Yeah.
Do you see like mainstream adoption usage, like for example, mainstream services from Web 2 going through decentralized storage? Are there any like traction around that?
So growing, I think maybe not on the Web 2 front as robustly, but like think of popular Web 3 native dApps today. So like would I consider Blue Sky a fully Web 3, functions like a Web 2, kind of uses Web 3 infra. So that's a really good example. Mirror today, the blog site uses Arweave. They don't use Filecoin, but they use Arweave, and that fully runs like any other Medium site. So I would see like there's a whole new host of application layers that are using some Web 3 infra, but also using some Web 2 that are coming up more. The Web 2, like old school Web 2, I think they will wait for this layer to be more mature first. Like there are conversations happening, but nothing concrete, maybe one or two, but nothing super concrete that has been happening at that layer just yet. Yeah.
All right.
So I think like the use cases you listed on the Ethereum front for like decentralized storage is on point, like very nice. Like for example, like how to put blobs in like decentralized storage, or because right now like there is only one data provider that has it, and you have to go ask them for the actual like blob content, etc. But for example, like one of the things you said, like the blob, how to say, like block building content. Which is like a huge data set. And I just pulled up like the stats. One time we asked one of the ultrasound relay for retrieving the block content, so to know how were the builders are like actively reconstructing the block. For like 6 months data is like 90 TB. And like it's gonna be really big to like have them like stored in a decentralized way. And I just wanna ask the questions like, how do you just like, who's gonna pay for the cost, and like who would be funding this kind of process? If you have any like guide for how can this like business model or things can be constructed? Because like, yeah, we do want it, but like it sounds like costly, and yeah, how can we do it?
Definitely, that's also a really important question. I think off the top of my mind, there are two things to consider. So if you look at the way like Solana did it, right? Chain ledger is like a public good, right? And if it's a public good for the Ethereum ecosystem, there's definitely a system where there could be a huge grant that comes from the foundation itself to support this so that the ecosystem can grow. That's one way. The second way would probably be something like a multi-sig, like a DAO-governed data set. So there's this concept of data DAOs. Don't know if there have been variations of it in the Web3 space, but essentially it functions like a DAO, and then there's a multi-sig that the team would consider dripping funds into to make sure that the data is stored. So if let's say you know that there's a year left, how can you keep getting funds from your DAO to then store that data longer? There's also a treasury component to it, such that if that data is useful and it provides profit via the outcomes, like if it supports scaling or L2s to scale, and there are profits that come out of that profit can also drip back, a percentage of that can drip back to the treasury, so then you get refunded, or that treasury itself just fully funds the data set. So that could be two different ways of business model. But that's actually a really good question. I would love to see if there's actually an out-of-box, like combining this and that into an out-of-box solution would be awesome.
All right, that seems to be the questions for the talk.
Thank you so
Sarah.
much. Thanks.
And now to continue, we have Hildobby with a talk about data sets. So moving from data storage to how do we actually sort and reason about this data and build data sets that the on-chain analysts can then use. And Hilda, of course, being one of the main people who build data sets in the space.
So his talk's title is Data Sets, Data Sets, Data Sets. Are you going to do the impression now?
No. Wait, extended. Okay. Okay, that will do. Hello, everyone. My name is Hildobby. I am head of data at a venture fund called Dragonfly. This is the logo. I thought it was cool. You can also find it in elevators if you want to go quick. So yeah. So you might have seen around my Dune dashboards. That's what I do in terms of public goods. So here's a bunch of them. It's a mess. There's a bit of everything. There's staking, there's ETFs, there's blobs, there's a bunch of stuff that I forgot as well. And this is actually not what I'll be talking about. I'll be talking about data sets, not dashboards, because one of the misconceptions around people building dashboards is that the core component is building the visualization, when that's not really the case. That's got to be probably the top 1% of the 10% of the work, and the real piece of meat is going to be, the actual data sets underneath the dashboard. And I think those go a much longer way than any dashboard does, simply because, if you have like a single query that like fetches everything, if you go from raw data to MEV profits, first of all, I mean, it's going to be hell to maintain. You want to have building blocks. It's just overall better, but it's also kind of a contribution to the space. It allows for others to use those data sets. It allows for people to build on top of those data sets. So one of the things that I've been doing over the past 3 years at Dragonfly, and even before then, is actually building data sets, not dashboards. Those are some of the data sets that actually back my dashboards. They're all open for everyone to use. I'll go over them later as well. But essentially, if you look at some of my dashboards, the important part for all of them is going to be the underlying data set, like I say again. So for blobs, for example, on Dune, you have 3 data sets that I use: blob submissions, blob mainnet transactions. So that's going to be both on the execution layer and the consensus layer. You need to group those two to actually get the full picture, as well as labeling who's actually posting for base, who's posting for optimism, and so on. And this is there's multiple types of data sets I'll get onto later. But it's the same for ETFs, where I'm actually trying to track specific addresses to see flows of ETFs instead of just tracking from Bloomberg terminal and stuff like this. I'll go and sleuth for different addresses where they hold those Ethereum or Bitcoin, depending on the ETF I'm looking at, and tag those and keep on updating them through heuristics, but also some manual inspection. NFTs, there's NFT trades, which has been involving a lot of actually data wizards at Dune. A lot of people have contributed to it. Some of the different teams. There's like the OpenSea, Blur, all this. They actually require a lot of maintenance to add not only new versions, but also maintain it if anything goes wrong, as well as update it to add new chains and so on. And this is the backbone. It's kind of like one of the most popular data set on Dune is going to be dex.trades. And it requires a lot of maintenance over there. Like you have no idea how many people actually contribute, go and add their protocol. And I don't think people realize the value of the data set, because without it, you wouldn't actually have all these dashboards pop up and all these different types of analysis. You could look at volume, but you could actually go much deeper into some very intricate things, and anyone can do what they like. So I encourage everyone to contribute and build data sets. There's also sandwiches, which DexTrades uses, as well as 2 others to surface actual MEV trades, in this case, sandwich attacks. And then there's another one which I'll share more at ETHTC if you're around on the 1st of July, where I try to sleuth for central exchanges on chain and what you can actually gather from that data. The funny thing is, so this is my Dune profile. I'm not here to flex, but the reason the reason I'm showcasing this is I actually used inspect element to hide the dashboard aspects to go straight to the queries. And what you will see is the two most popular queries is basically just data sets that I've put together. So there's interest. The way Dune works is the dashboard is going to be what most of you use, but the actual other builders on Dune are going to be interested in the queries more than the dashboards. And my most popular query to date is something that I started 3 years ago because I use in many occasions, which is central exchange addresses, trying to tag those on chain. And I'll finally get something out in a few weeks to showcase with just those. But it actually is part of a bigger picture, kind of a building block. So, yeah. One of the things I spend the most time doing on Dune is actually sleuthing for addresses. So the dashboard I use the most is actually my least popular dashboard. It's just a dashboard called sleuthing, where I added a bunch of those queries for all kinds of things. So here you have staking. Here I'm looking at like who the top stakers are. And each of these icons, there's going to be Etherscan, Nansen, SamCZ's label thing, GitHub, and Arkham. So I can quickly go and inspect on those explorers and actually, find out if there's any info on them and if I can get any heuristics together to actually come up with who the hell this is. Same for blobs. Here, OPStack actually has a cool thing where when they post a blob, the two address it posts to contain the chain ID, which is super valuable info, as long as you can actually find that chain ID listed somewhere, which isn't always the case. So in these cases, they're not listed. And if you have any clue, please, I'm open to any tips on Telegram or Twitter as to who this is. Central exchanges, like I said, I'm working on it right now, but it's actually involved in many other pieces. Like, because of their prominence on chain, you can't just ignore them. Like, it's a very, very important data set. So I constantly try to what I'm looking at is when you make a deposit on central exchanges, the way it works is, so you can send ETH, any native token, and then it's all good. They can actually send from the deposit to themselves. But if you send an ERC20, you actually need gas to send that ERC20 over to their wallet afterwards. So what they'll often do is actually fund this wallet with gas and then send it. But the funding wallet and the receiving wallet can be different. So if you only have one of the two, with a few heuristics, you can actually figure out the other. And this is what I'm doing here, is you got one node, what's the other one, and vice versa. Blobs, you can look at it through chain ID, but you can also look at it by prominence of blob posted. Who's posting a lot of blobs? Maybe that's where I want to focus. You want to tag, the more prominent. The tail end isn't as relevant. You'll always have tail end chains that you're just never going to tag, because obviously not everyone is willing to be doxed. But yeah, data sets are kind of like Lego bricks. Look at this cool design I did yesterday at night. But yeah, what I want to showcase is how contributing to data sets actually help others build on top. And my view is that over time, we started from DeFi Summer, was like you look at like token transfers and like DEXs, but actually over time there's MEV and there's more and more new progress. The two, just a caveat, the two green ones that are a bit white as well, those aren't available, but those are theoretically available in the future if someone builds it, maybe me. But yeah, just to showcase how, I kind of see all these data sets as kind of a pyramid of Lego blocks. And over time, you want to go further and further. And the more you have the data sets available, the more you can go further and actually investigate. So this is one of the reasons I build on Dune, because of the community aspects. and that there's a lot of other people contributing. I could never maintain most of these data sets just by myself. Like I said, there's multiple types of data sets. And I'll label them in 3 different main types. The manual tagging is pretty straightforward. It's just labeling addresses. It is straightforward in how it's built, but I think it's also about people often forget the accuracy metric, which is the most important. I would rather have, a small data set with like super accurate labeling than like a huge data set. That's what you'll see on mainly labeling website. Like we have 3 million addresses, which is a completely useless metric, but I guess it gets a message. And I don't care about that. I'd rather have, all the dexes in one place, and therefore I have the dex space actually tagged properly, rather than like 3 million random addresses of like just ENSs. Sure, I could tag 1 million addresses. That's not the hard part. The hard part is actually having a complete picture of an ecosystem, and that is the most valuable, yet not really understood by, I think, tagging platforms today. The other type is going to be decoded event role. And that's going to be your DEX trades, that's going to be your NFT trades. So that's actually looking at smart contracts, events they emit, if those happen to be decoded, which most good protocols are. If not, that's not great. But yeah, this is all about like actually working with the events and augmenting it with extra info that you may need in order to have a result data set from which you can do a ton of stuff. And then there's heuristics-based. This is something that you don't base on. Well, I mean, you can use decoded data sets, but it's going to be more based on, like, let's say dex.trades, where from this, based on a few heuristics, I'm looking at like singling out sandwich transactions, singling out atomic arbitrage, or stuff like this. And I would say I put a difficulty scale here as an indication. It's not obviously, it's not exactly this for everything, but it should be an indicator of like, if you want to get started in data, it's probably easier to start from there than to start from there. Yeah. So yeah, there's, let's say 3 different views of like how data works. Most platform will be closed source. So that means you actually have only the visualization, which is great, but you can't actually investigate into. It's much harder also to cross-check versus other platforms, simply, for example, because the price feed is going to be different, and therefore, like, how do you compare volumes? Like, is it just because of the price feed, or is it like some other outlier? There's also slight interpretation changes. So, the better platform is going to be the open-ended one where you can actually see the code and investigate what is going on, what did the dev that actually built it try to do, why did it go for this approach, and why is it different from that other source? So I mentioned Dune, but obviously there's stuff like DeFi Llama, there's stuff like Grow the Pie, all these where the data set I opened go a really long way, and I think you don't appreciate it enough. But it's just hard to measure because there's also a citation issue, but that's another thing, I guess. And my ideal future is one where everyone shares their data sets. It's more of a utopia than anything, of course. Of course, when you make a data set, that's also your pile of gold, and you're not giving out your gold for free. It makes sense. That's what data businesses do, and I understand it. But we should encourage analysts to share this data set. I think, in general, right now, what you'll see on Twitter and social media is the cloud goes to the dashboards rather than the data sets, when, like I said, I think the data set is more important. So like the incentives are kind of like the wrong way around. If we actually incentivize for better data sets, we could build a shit ton of really cool dashboard on top of it, and that would be much more productive. So yeah, come contribute to Spellbook. This is my Dune chill. So the horse guy is this guy. He'll be presenting later, and there was just a recently made change to Spellbook. Wait, just to clarify, Spellbook is the open platform on Dune which allows for anyone to contribute and create data sets. Everyone can iterate on them, And it used to be a little too open-ended, but now they're refocusing to high priority data sets like DEX trades, NFT trades, which tend to be high impact rather than like this obscure protocols, TVL or whatever, you know, which only this one dev is going to look at. So yeah, please join. There's like over 400 analysts who have contributed to it, and we're always looking for more. Yeah, I don't work at Dune, but you know, I'm a heavy user and a heavy benefiter as well as contributor to the platform. When I arrived at Zoo Berlin, I didn't really know what I was going to talk about. And then I talked about data sets to some people, and I realized I had this dashboard that was in my private for a while. I've been using it. It's just a list of data sets that I use, and I thought I might as well make it public. And it's kind of my curated list. So this is where the whole idea of the talk stems from, is Spellbook in its current form does have a lot of data sets, but like all things, when it's open-ended, you're gonna have good and less good data sets. So this is all the data sets. You can actually go check on dune.com/hillw/spells. This is all the data sets that I kind of vet, because I've usually heavily contributed or created them, as well as like the raw tables, the price feeds. Yeah, most of my analysis are going to be based on this, and I'll keep adding some over time. So yeah, feel free to go track and let me know if there's anything I should add on there that you think warrants an addition. Yeah, hopefully this is the takeaway. This is the current takeaway of this talk. And actually, if you are around for ETC, this is probably the takeaway that I want you to have. And yeah, this is the end of my talk. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Any questions from the room?
Yeah, like about your ETF data set, like it comes from off-chain data, right?
No, just only on-chain.
Okay, nice. Okay, so my question was, there's a lot of off-chain data that is also being used in Dune, like you can do like API called inquiries and things like that.
Yeah.
So what's your take on that? Yeah, your view on using off-chain and mixing it with on-chain?
My view is that if it's the only way, you should use it, but I always try to minimize third-party reliance. It's just more complex down the line, and you're setting yourself up for later, things breaking. And when I build a data set or a dashboard, my goal is to have it be as low maintenance as possible, so I can actually build other dashboards afterwards instead of just getting stuck on it and maintaining. But yeah, in terms of ETFs, it's all based on, for Bitcoin, I have like 7,500 addresses tagged, and then Ethereum is going to be like 3,000. And I keep on adding new ones based on heuristics. It's going to be mostly like Coinbase Prime, who's the custodian. So I kind of know which addresses those tokens come from, and I roughly know the amounts that I'm looking for. I cross-check with off-chain sources. I cross-check with Chainlink oracles like the 121 share provides. I also am in touch with Bitwise, who has an API and actually made all these addresses public. That's awesome from them. But I kind of want to use this dashboard as a showcase for how we can actually use crypto for what it's worth rather than just having an ETF on top. Like, we can actually prove that the addresses hold this amount and follow the flows ourselves. So my idea would be to pill TradFi into actually seeing the benefits of on-chain data through that dashboard. For now, it's mostly used as a data source for flows, which is also great. But maybe later down the line, hopefully that gets institution moving on this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your talk. I know you talk a lot about trusting and verifying that the data set is actually correct. Can you maybe walk me through when you go to a completely random Dune dashboard and you want to make sure that you actually read correct data, how do you, like, what is your process for verifying data, and also how do you make sure that you can trust a data set?
I mean, the truth is I don't trust most data sets. That's why I build them. It's hard. It's a big problem in general. Like, curation is hard in data. Like, no one has it figured out. Anyone could publish anything, and based on the Twitter followers, it looks like it may be accurate because you have a lot of followers, but in actuality, it doesn't make you an expert to have a lot of Twitter followers, right? So it's a tough problem, and I don't think like everyone's. I do what we call, you know, chart crimes all the time. You can't have it all accurate all the time. That's all I request, though, that if you do like correct it and actually, you know, get things moving rather than like not learning from your mistake. And then in terms of data sets, ideally I can actually inspect the data set and actually how it's made. The more complex the query, the more worrisome it is to me. Like if it's, you know, hard coding a bunch of addresses in random places, it's like, unless it's like something specific like staking where you need, okay, the staking address, of course. But in most cases, the more it's hard coded, the more it's like specific to certain flows, the more it's going to be missing out and likely inaccurate. But it's the verification process right now is hard. I would actually love to talk about this if you have ideas on how we can push for something better and better curation all around. I do think we probably need some kind of social layer on top of data sets to actually, not social layer can mean a lot of things, but like, you know, calling out bad data sets, actually showcasing why, like what are the pros, what are the cons of this data set. If it's outdated, you know, it would be nice to have it flagged by the first person who sees it so that others later on don't like not realize it. But it's tough. It's a very weird problem because the issue with dataset is maintenance. Eventually, every dataset goes unmaintained, and where do you go from there? I do think right now Dune is the best place to collaborate and hopefully hand it over to other people. But I wish other platforms followed that in the Dune footsteps and made their data more open-ended in a way.
Thank you.
As Dune, I can say it's very hard.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, the data curation and like the maintenance of Spellbook and the overhead that produces by just having a lot of contributors from all around the world with like all kinds of language barriers, culture barriers. Like a lot of data analysts in Web3 are actually kind of self-taught, which I think is super cool. Like it's actually kind of a power of Web3 that like anyone can go in here, like learn a little bit of SQL and then kind of like model the state of all of these different protocols. But yeah, as being on the receiving end of like getting a bunch of non-very optimized SQL queries, things do get a bit dicey. So yeah, just to kind of throw that in, I think like I am now responsible for Spellbook, so like my kind of idea is, okay, like let's build a community around this, and like let's build data sets together. I don't think that has happened in the past. Like you've just gone off and done your thing, and like we've kind of maintained Dexter trades, we've kind of maintained Solana Dex trades, but like overall it's like very, like it's just like a wild growth of everything. And like, yeah, I agree that like we should come together and build these data sets to progress the space. And if Dune can be a facilitator of that, we'd love to be. But at the same time, Dune's also running a business. We're not a non-profit organization, and so there's always considerations to be made. But of course, let's try to build these data sets together. But it's pretty hard, and I think that's actually a perfect bridge towards the next talk, which is Lawrence, who works with Grow the Pie. To surprise you. And Grow the Pie famously being a website that tracks all kinds of L2 stats. I'm sure Lawrence can give a quick introduction, and Lawrence is going to talk about an initiative he's been trying to get started over the last year or so, which is the Open Labels Initiative. It's been hard at work. I see the call summaries every Thursday in Telegram. And yeah, Lawrence, take it away, and maybe he's trying to solve one of the data collaboration problems. So I'm super interested in what his perspective will be on these topics.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. My name is Lawrence. I'm currently the researcher at Grow the Pie. And yeah, we are trying to push forward a standardized data model and entry point for labels. I know everyone kind of hates labels because it's so much work, but I think there's a lot of problems that can be solved quite easily. And I think, yeah, I will just jump into it. What Open Labels Initiative is, how we came to it, because honestly, we didn't want to build it. But when we ran into a bunch of problems, we were like, damn, this problem needs fixing, otherwise we can't build the products. And then we talked to other data teams and realized, wow, so many other data teams suffer from the same problems. Like, so many countless hours are wasted on just redundantly labeling addresses, which is kind of sad because we could be doing something better. We could be writing better SQL queries, better data sets, but also, yeah, just get more analytics out. So yeah, maybe let's start off with a little quiz. Here I have an Ethereum address. Who knows what it is? Yeah, Boxer. Yeah, perfect. It's wrapped Ethereum, correct? Very good. Okay, one more. Maybe a little bit more tough. I hope some people. Yeah, okay. I will tell you. It's a Titan builder on Ethereum. It's a tricky one, but last time I did something like that, everyone guessed it instantly, so I had to put in something more complicated. But yeah, my point being here is that blockchain data is hard, right? It's so cryptic, and without labels, we are kind of lost. And also, what if I told you this was Uniswap? Would you believe me? Probably yes, right? Maybe it's not even Titan Builder. So these address labels are also just as good as the person you trust providing them to you. And as I said, Open Labels Initiative was something we span out of Grow the Pie, and we really didn't want to build it. But when we were starting our project with block space section, which you can see behind me, which is basically analyzing the whole block space section of different layer 2s and categorizing them into different categories, we realized, wow, there's a labeling problem in our space. We started by looking at the space, okay? We are public goods. We don't want to spend too much money on labels. What are open data sets we can use? And then we came across, yeah, Dune labels, some other GitHub maintained labels, some random websites. And we really realized, hey, everyone is doing something else. Everyone has a different data model. It was a complete mess. And what we did, like many others, right, we just built our own data set and started from scratch ultimately, which was a painful process. So while sourcing labels, I think we found 3 problems. First of all, labels are hard to get. So a lot of companies actually put them behind paywalls. For example, I guess the biggest example is Etherscan. They have one of the best label sets. But of course, they spend, or like they have 5 or 6 full-time employers working on labels. Of course, they need to make money off that. So they charge around, I think, $600 or $700 per month to access these labels. Then we also realized, yeah, they are centralized. So let's say you are a dApp builder and you want to label your contracts. There's no neutral entity. You have to go to Etherscan and upload the labels there. Then if you want your labels to be on Dune, you go to Dune and upload them there. Then you go to Allium, upload labels there. So it's like a centralized system. Everyone has their own data sets they maintain, and you have to go there to upload them individually. And the third thing is, a lot of them are unmaintained. So we came to the realization when looking through GitHub repos, sure, everyone is excited to get started, but after a few months, everyone is kind of sick and tired of maintaining label data sets, so they just get abandoned. And then you're left with a bunch of outdated labels. So these, I think, are the three major problems. And how can we now solve them? And I think that's actually a hard problem, but also a cool problem, because there's a lot of tech we can use, which is Web3 native, to make these problems go away. Oh yeah, and one more problem. Everyone stores their labels differently. So Etherscan has a different data model they use. Dune does it differently. Allium does it differently. Random people on GitHub does it differently. There's like no standardization. Yeah, so there's really no standardization in how to store labels, and also in data teams creating their own, because they can't find data sets that are applicable to their use cases. So where do we go from here? So as you now understand the problem, how can we actually solve it? And for us, it took us now almost 1 year of development, because we did it as a side project, and then it took up more and more work. But now we are really doubling down on what we are trying to build here, because we see that there are a lot of other data teams that can leverage this. So where do we want to go? So as I said, first of all, it's important that we have a decentralized way of storing labels, right? We don't want some data team having full control of them, and if they go bankrupt, all the labels disappear, similar to our first talk today. It's important that we store them in a decentralized way and let everyone contribute, but also consume labels. But to really get there, we don't really want the data lake, right? We want high quality labels. So we kind of need to agree on a data model. So what we thought about ourselves, okay, let's first start off with agreeing on a data model. And we spent literally almost 3 or 4 months getting all data teams together, kind of agreeing to a data model. And I feel like that was one of the biggest problems, and I think we came up with a good solution. Okay, but yeah, now we have a data model everyone agrees on. We have a bunch of data, or like a bunch of labels in a decentralized way. Everyone can contribute. But now we run into a third problem, right? There's like no quality assurance. How can we trust some random guy on the internet with their labels? So we need some way of filtering down only to the highest quality of labels. So we don't want spammers or, I don't know, ruggers labeling themselves as Uniswap and rugging people, right? We only want high quality labels that we can trust. So how can we build something like that in a decentralized way? And yeah, now, shameless plug, Open Labels Initiative, check it out. What we did at Open Labels Initiative is, first of all, we agreed on a data model. And the data model is super simple but flexible. So you can see the whole data model on the right here. It's called the OLI framework. And it simply has an address and chain ID, and then different tags. And different tags are associated one value. And that's it. So a tag could be contract name, for example, which would be WEF or Uniswap or whatever. But it could also be category, like a DEX. Or it could be a project, Uniswap. And by taking the approach of a very flexible data model, we could finally convince the whole data community to agree on it, right? Because you can always come up with new data IDs and then create new categories for that, or like a new type of labeling. Then the next thing we did was create, or like think about decentralized ways to store labels where anyone can send labels to, but also retrieve labels from. And that was also not that simple, because a lot of decentralized storage solutions, they are not, I don't know, they are still in the early days. I think IPFS is doing a great job here. But ultimately, if nobody maintains or like pins these IPFS data, it's also get lost. So we ended up choosing the Ethereum attestation service, which is fully on chain. with the option to store stuff on IPFS and pinning that to chain, basically. And by doing that we can now enable anyone to contribute labels, but also directly read them from on-chain. So they will never be lost as long as we have our beloved blockchains running. And now the hardest problem, the label confidence. So okay, now everyone can go to the EAS contracts, attest their labels, but ultimately, okay, can we trust them? And for that, we looked into a lot of research, and there is a lot of research being done on that, because it's basically a problem of trusting people in a group you don't know who is in that group, basically. And we talked to the Ethereum attestation service guys, and they actually released a paper that addresses this problem, which is basically a transitive trust algorithm. So, for example, I'm an entity that posts labels into the label pool. If I trust, let's say, Kofi and Hildobby and Boxer, I know they will submit valid labels. And let's say Boxer knows 5 other people. Then I can trust Boxer's 5 other people with a certain percentage. And if we create such a network, we can actually create a transitive trust score to each label submitted to the label pool. So let's say you're an entity that tries to scam people with fake labels. No one will know you, no one will, maybe people will see that you attested a wrong label, and they will instantly know, nobody will trust you, meaning you will never have a high score. And we are currently building this into the Open Labels initiative, so anyone can just have a list of certain trusted entities, and it will directly give them all the labels that are associated and transitive trust with a certain percentage. So you can literally say, oh, I only want the top 10% of high quality labels, or I want top 90% if you like a little bit more okay with having 1 or 2 wrong labels in them. Yeah, by doing it this way, we can literally make sure that everyone can get as many labels as they want, or as a high quality they would like from this label pool. Yeah, and like I said, we started a year ago, and conceptualizing this took quite a long time, but now we finally launched, and we also have a leaderboard on our website, so you can see your favorite data contributor on there, especially on the third place. Shout out to you, Kofi, for attesting all your bundler bears labels. And yeah, so we now have it live, and anyone can now access these labels, and you can say, hey, I trust Kofi, I trust Grow the Pie, and instantly can get only the highest quality of labels that you trust. So this is the system we're trying to build. And we're still early, we're still building our tooling. So recently we launched a pip package. So it's like within 3 lines of code in your backend, you can now attest labels, but also retrieve them. And we're working on multiple integrations. So for example, Agnostics, they added ours, and Sourcify is also now using our the labels in the label pool. So yeah, if you have any label need or also labels to contribute, feel free to reach out to me. And yeah, let's solve this labeling problem. Let's stop spending so much time and label together as a community. Thank you. Yeah, any questions?
No questions from the room. How much? What's the extent of the labels data set today? Like how much of, I think you're basically using this for like powering Go the Pie's block space allocation, which I think is like a good measure of like how many relevant smart contracts have you actually mapped. So what's the percentage of, I think you call it like unidentified or something on Ethereum mainnet today? Yeah, so that's a good point, because the label pool is only as good as the contributors, right? And Grow the Pie is one of the biggest contributors. We cover mostly layer 2 ecosystem. Therefore, that's where the most labels are.
I mean, there's also other labels, like we even support Solana labels or Bitcoin labels. But ultimately, for Ethereum mainnet, I think we have around 70% of transactions to addresses mapped. Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty solid.
Can you describe the trust process? So how's the verification process of these labels?
Yeah, so the trust process currently works. We have only a raw alpha currently running. It works by you selecting the people you trust. And that might only be 5 or 6 people, which is fine. And you can also define which tag ID you trust. So not just only who you trust, but also which tag ID. And then we have a filtering system. You just give it that list, and instantly it will filter down the whole label pool, all the attestations in the label pool on EAS, and will only give you back the labels submitted by them. Then that is already working. The next step would be to then have a repo where you upload your trusted entities, I upload my trusted entities, everyone uploads their trusted entities, and then we build this transitive trust score. Yeah, and then it calculates, hey, I trust you, you trust someone else, so I can trust that the third person maybe 50% of the time. And by doing that, so then we would be able to really get this transitive trust score going. But yeah, it's currently still under development, but yeah, the basic filtering works so far. Yeah.
How are you thinking about label updatability with the new pip package, right? Because basically what my question is if I attest to a label today saying, oh, here's this address with 3 tags, and then later on I'm just like, oh, I want to make another attestation for that same address, but now with 4 tags, like there's an additional tag that I added. If I do that using the pip package, will there end up being 2 labels in the like attestation pool that then need to be compared against each other in this trust score thing? Or would the first label get updated to include the 4th tag that I included?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's like you said at the beginning, you basically then have 2 attestations. And with the pip package also comes the retrieval process. So in the pip package, if it detects 2 attestation to the same contract with the same tag IDs, it will always pick the later one. And we hard-coded that. So if you notice a mistake and reattest, the old attestation is still there, but it will not be picked up upon. Then there's actually a second way to do it. So the EAS has fundamentally allows revocations. So you can also simply say, okay, this label's wrong, but I also don't know what the correct version is. I will just revoke that old attestation, and then it will just become invalid and not picked up by the retrieval system through Open Labels Initiative. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's one last thing about the updatability. If you've got like a bunch of labels and then more labels got added to those labels and you're doing an attestation again, does the package currently check if you're about to attest something that you've already attested the exact same thing? So like this is the exact same address with the exact same tags, and maybe it can be skipped. Like, is there something inside of the package for checking if it can be skipped, or would you just again end up just attesting the same thing accidentally?
Currently, there's no checks in place that checks if you actually already attested the same thing.
Feature request.
But yeah, okay, that's a good. I will write it down. Yeah, the pip package is definitely also there will be new versions coming out soon. But I think that definitely makes it more useful and yeah, a better way to make sure that you're not just wasting gas money by just sending new transactions for attestations you already made. Thank you.
And quick follow-up question. So if I do like a redeployment of a contract or of a protocol, I'll just redeploy like a series of things, right? Some might stay, some might change, right? So then is there a way that your package, or that I can query like the latest version of let's say, a deployment of a protocol, for instance? Like, how do I
Yeah.
deduplicate like the equally tagged contracts, which will have the same label, right? But it's just a newer version of the deployment.
Yeah, so I guess so there are multiple things. As long as it's a new address, right, the old address tag will stay unless it's revoked. And then if it's like it's just Uniswap v4 now or v5, there's also a tag ID that tracks versions of projects. And then you just basically assign a tag ID called version, assign it to Uniswap v3, which would just be version 3, and then assign that tag to the Uniswap name, and that's how we currently have it handled in the data model. Yeah.
All right, any more questions from the room? Yep.
Hey there, yeah. So I've been working with ENS to try figuring out how we can identify open source repos and associate an ENS name with them so that we can stream funding. So I guess my main question is that, is there any synergy between ENS and the open label initiatives to actually make things they already have an identity standard. So is there anything to kind of bandwagon off that, whether through sub ENSs or even registering their own?
Yeah, actually that's a good point, because what the Open Labels initiative currently lacks is especially like social links or website links, stuff like that, because we are trying to tag mainly static things. And I know you at ENS have some sort of social profile behind each ENS domain. And I think cooperating on that would be where I see a lot of synergies. So we can incorporate you, and rather than maintaining random website names on the Open Labels initiative, which would, I think, just be too messy. I think it's better if, yeah. So I see there a lot of synergies. Yeah, we should definitely talk.
All right, any more questions from the room? It doesn't seem like it. Yeah, it would be beautiful if the ENS names were just inside of the Open Labels initiative. If somebody would just build a script to pull all the ENS names, but that's quite a few at this point. But yeah, thank you, Lawrence. Thank you for coming and sharing your insights on labels, and hopefully one day the space can align on standards. Or maybe you've just created the 16th standard. A classic problem. Next up, we have Grace. She's a data scientist at Uniswap. I hope that's the correct title. If not, correct me. And she's gonna tell us about Uniswap, Unichain, and Uniswap X. All right, got it right. Your microphone is where you are.
Give me 1 second to set this up.
I can keep talking.
Yeah, keep going. You missed V4 and like a little bit about smart wallets at the end, if we have time.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
Uniswap Wallet is adopting EIP 7702, I think, which is very exciting. It's a prediction I made on the Index podcast a while ago, where I was like, the wallets need to actually bring forward the integration of smart wallets. That's a weird sentence, but they need to adopt these standards because the users themselves will never do it. So yeah, very exciting.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the intro. Sorry about that. Yeah. So today I'm just going to be going over all Uniswap data that is on chain. So a little bit about me. I am a data scientist at Uniswap Labs. I specifically focus on our protocols team, but that kind of seeps into everything that we do at Labs. So yeah, I'm just going to cover what's on chain today, obviously. But the goal is to kind of show you how we think about all of the data that we produce and the building blocks that we have. So yeah, starting kind of from the bottom to the top, I would say, even though they're all realistically in the same kind of zone. We're going to go over Unichain, the Uniswap protocols, which is V1 through V4, though we're going to mainly focus on V4 since that is what is new. Uniswap X, we're going to cover a little bit on liquidity sources on Ethereum, as well as kind of, Uniswap X on base as well. And then if we have time, which I think we will, because I'm going to try to get through this, we're just going to cover a little bit on Uniswap Labs Smart Wallet, the delegations that we've seen, and kind of the activity that we've seen coming from smart wallets. All right, so starting off with Unichain. So the goal also of this presentation is there is a million metrics that I could possibly show you about all of these things. I'm kind of going to show you a few of our favorites that we like to track internally, and kind of how we think about what metrics we're looking at and what they tell us actually. So starting off strong with this active contracts metric, you may have seen that there have been over 150K contracts deployed on Unichain. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't really tell us much about like what types of contracts and or their usage on Unichain. And so we have this active contracts heuristic that was kind of based off of an old heuristic the OP team used to use, which looks at a combination of traces, transactions in terms of who is calling the transactions as well as how many there are, and the actual logs emitted, or I guess that's traces as well, from these transactions to kind of tell us on a given day, how can we define what an active contract is. And so this metric actually is really fun to play with in terms of, setting the thresholds for these different things, because the heuristic ultimately affects kind of what the result is. But we've come to kind of this heuristic of like, we call it 5-5-10, which is like 5 traces sent by at least 5 different wallets or 5 traces per transaction that are overall that are sent by at least 5 different wallets and at least 10 transactions per day. If we do that over time, that is how many active contracts we see. On a given day, this active contracts metric is usually between 100 to 200 contracts. We ideally would like to go more into this in the future, kind of looking at, tokens deployed, any bytecode that's the same, et cetera. But we just haven't got there yet. So yeah, another metric that we like to look at is, average daily transactions. I kind of included this chart showing daily gas versus the number of transactions, because I think it's hard to just see a raw number of transactions and understand what's going on. And you can see that like the rise in transactions doesn't like correlate to, the spikes in gas. And so I think the gas without the transactions or the transactions without the gas doesn't really tell you what you need to know. And then the last is average gas per second, which like we are nowhere near our gas limit, but it is cool to track and see how that has been going up in the most recent months, which is probably due to TVL, which we'll get to later. So yeah, step number 2 is Unichain economics. So a lot of this work has piggybacked off of the wonderful roll-up economics dashboard on Dune. Shout out Kofi for that incredible data set. And yeah, these are priced in dollars, but we also track things in ETH. We tend to look at as well kind of the percentage of revenue that comes from priority fees. When we first launched Unichain, we actually saw a lot larger portion of the quote-unquote revenue coming from all sorts of things, but definitely not priority fees. I would say more the L1 fee, which was kind of strange. And then, we like to track blob gas costs kind of and understand like their percentage of the actual L1 cost that we end up paying. Almost all, I think, our data is posted on blobs. So, yeah. It remains mainly constant over time, I would say. It doesn't, we haven't seen quite enough demand to make it kind of stretch. That makes sense. Okay, cool. Then, I could show you a bunch of economic charts, but instead I get to show you everyone's favorite cumulative volume. Sorry. Also, there's 2 charts included on the right-hand side because for some reason the DEX volume on DeFi Llama is not comprehensive on certain days. So kind of encourage you, if you see something like that where all of a sudden it drops off on a given day, to actually check what you see on other platforms as well, because sometimes there can be errors. And so this actually shows you like TVL in comparison to daily DEX volume, which I think is important to understand, you know, you really, like the DEX volume is ultimately driven by TVL. Yeah, and then a few of other the metrics that we kind of track is the percentage of Uniswap TVL on Unichain. So this in basically is looking at like of all the TVL in all the Uniswap protocols, what percentage of that is on Unichain? And given the fact that we build both of those protocols, you know, that is something that we like to know and understand. And then I guess I should mention this percentage liquidity in Uniswap metric. The denominator is a little bit confusing in the sense that it comes from DeFi Llama as well, and it's just the total like liquidity or TVL in DeFi, any DeFi contract. So it's not just DEXs. So it's interesting to look at, but like we always take it with a grain of salt. I just thought we'd include it here. It essentially says that almost a little over half of DeFi TVL on Unichain is in Uniswap. Okay, we're gonna blaze through TVS. The main takeaway here, honestly, is that one, externally bridged volume has almost caught up to what we've seen from the canonical bridge, which a few months ago, that was not the case. Most native ETH is bridged through the canonical bridge, so almost all of that comes from just people bridging native ETH. As well as if we look at the inflows and outflows by chain, I think the biggest takeaway here is that while most of the inflows kind of come from Ethereum, which is what we'd expect, actually we see kind of more of the proportion of outflows, like there's greater outflows than inflows for Arbitrum and Berachain, which is quite interesting because, you know, theoretically, these are potentially DeFi power users, which is what we built Unichain for, but they're not bridging to Unichain, they're actually bridging from Unichain, which is interesting. All right, now onto the Uniswap protocol. Ooh, another cumulative volume metric, but we just crossed 3 trillion, so I had to throw it on here. You know, we see about 14% of the daily volume is from V4. I mentioned this because actually already this year we've seen V4 surpass V2 in volume, which traditionally V2 has been about a third of the volume we see, a third of V3 volume specifically. We don't see much V1 volume anymore. But yeah, we're only, you know, we launched V4 back in February and it's already surpassed V2, which is pretty exciting. So most of the V4 volume comes from 3 chains. It's actually Binance, Unichain, and then Ethereum, which is a strange ordering. But if we, you know, look at the percentage of Uniswap volume on Binance that, you know, comes from different versions, we see that it's like, you know, 40% comes from Unichain, or comes from V4 on Binance. So yeah, you can see Unichain is mainly V4 volume, which incentives. Anyways, on to Uniswap TVL. So currently we see about 24% of TVL across all versions of Uniswap in V4. If we look at that kind of average, obviously because TVL fluctuates over the past month, we actually see that around 20% of TVL is in V4, and then an even split between V3 and V2. So even though we've kind of seen more volume in V4, we still haven't seen that same distribution of TVL. And we are almost at 1 billion in TVL in V4. That'll be a very exciting, another great metric. All right, so on to V4 hooks. I think this is probably the most exciting, given the fact that last time I talked about V4, we didn't have V4 data yet. So it is launched, it is out there. We have a bunch of great dashboards on hooks. Also, all the charts and resources that I'm mentioning are linked at the end. So when I share out this deck, it'll kind of be like a data glossary for everything to do with Unichain, or Uniswap, sorry, a lot of different products. So yeah, I think, you know, we've seen almost 1,200 hooks deployed. Bunny and Aegis are definitely the 2 largest, with this increase in, you know, hooked pool volume kind of in the past week or so has been mainly driven on Unichain due to incentives run by the foundation. They added 3 hooked pools to their incentives program, and so this is mainly where that has been coming from. But this wonderful dashboard, which I have linked at the end, kind of shows you a high level how each of these hooks have been doing, the volume that's been going through them, what are the top pools, and I think it's extremely interesting to look at. You know, volume through hooks right now still makes up around 1% only of V4 volume, and so we're kind of hoping to increase that as, you know, more hook development occurs and people start adopting. So yeah, okay, on to Uniswap X, which we typically don't talk too much about, but we are starting to. So the total volume through Uniswap X has been 22 billion. This number of fillers is just on Ethereum. We do have different fillers on Base and Arbitrum. Yeah, we have a pretty high fill rate as well as daily number of orders filled. The fill rate comes from like if a user submits an order that is through Uniswap X, basically, that is how likely we are to fill it. Yeah, around 23 million in volume every day. That volume, I will get to in a second, but is pretty evenly split between Base and Ethereum, actually. So liquidity sources, we're specifically focused on Ethereum here. But if we look at, this is, okay, so one thing to note about these charts is that when you fill a Uniswap X order, it doesn't have to be through one liquidity source. So if you summed the number of transactions, it would actually be higher than the actual number of Uniswap X transactions. That is not a bug, that is by design. We want to know just how many transactions essentially are using different different liquidity sources. And you can see this is on a log scale just so we can like see it and it's not huge. But most of Uniswap X volume still goes through private sources of liquidity, essentially. 71% of, or 71% of transactions going through Uniswap X use some sort of private liquidity source. And then this is kind of to give you a relative picture of the percentage of swaps on Uniswap that end up going through Uniswap X. Right now it's around 30%. This is by just looking at the universal router. And I think this is just for Ethereum. Danning, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But if we extrapolate to Base, it is around the same as well. And I fact check that internally. So, okay. And then these charts kind of look at Uniswap X across chains. So what we see here is that, the number of orders filled actually has increased on Base. So there's more Uniswap X orders on Base now than Ethereum, which, we kind of in early April rolled out Uniswap X to all of potentially labs users. So we kind of saw that increase as a function of that. But what's interesting to note as well as the distribution, like on Uniswap X on Ethereum, we see much larger size swaps versus on Base. It's much more even distribution across different sizes. So that's been exciting to see, and we actually do see really great price improvement through Uniswap X. So yeah, I guess since April, 50% of orders make up 35% of volume through Uniswap X on Base, which is pretty cool. Arbitrum has been kind of a smaller portion of Uniswap X volume, but we are working on that currently. So yeah, all right, we made it to smart wallets. I hope I'm not too far on time. Hope you're not sick of me talking yet. But this is looking at delegations by chain. So we've recently, I think we're over 8,000, maybe we're at 9,000 delegations on chain, which is huge because, in order to, we just launched like 2 weeks ago. So if you want to check it out, go download the Uniswap Smart Wallet and click Enable. It's awesome. Or if you create a new wallet, actually, it is auto-enabled. That is a feature as well that we decided upon to kind of give users the best UX experience we possibly can. And this is super exciting because, in order to delegate on-chain, you actually have to, swap first. And so it kind of gives us a picture as to, how many users are enabling and then as well as continuing with the enable and going through and seeing that on-chain delegation. So, just if we looked at the number of Uniswap wallets that we have totally enabled, either via creating a new or by clicking enable, we see about 40,000 right now, which means that almost a quarter of them have actually gone through and continue swapping, which obviously has some selection bias due to the fact that if you are clicking enable, you are probably more of a power user, or if you're new, you're more likely to swap in your first few days. But that still is exciting. And then this kind of harps on that point right now. But I included this chart from Wintermute on the right-hand side. They did a wonderful report on 7702. One thing to specify is when I first saw this, I was a little confused because I was like, wait, that would be awesome if we had that many delegations already. That would be insane. But actually, these are just transactions done by authorized wallets. So transactions being, I think they don't specify to swapping, but I'm not quite sure. And then on the left-hand side, this actually just shows delegations versus swaps. So we see users that have delegated on a few of these chains, I think notably Ethereum base. Bridge transactions are essentially like, internally we look at like if a user has bridged from a chain to a different chain, we kind of categorize those as differently just because they aren't on a specific chain. So we kind of bundle the delegation either with a bridge transaction, which technically under the hood is just a swap via a cross, or we do that based off of whatever swap on whatever chain. Yeah, so these are all the resources. I'm sorry, there were a few charts in here that include data that I probably can't share, unfortunately. But there are wonderful, wonderful resources here. Most of these charts have come from public data sets, public work that people have done, which is absolutely incredible. And yeah, I will continue adding to this as I find more incredible sources. And I think one thing that is missing from here is actually grow the pie on Unichain. So I will add that as well. That is all from me. Sorry, that was a lot. Thank you.
That much. Could have gone longer. Any questions from the room?
I've got a question.
Yes.
What does the feature set look like for this version of the Uniswap smart wallet? I mean, I know that you guys will have the bundled actions, so like, approve and swap in one transaction, but are you also doing gas sponsorship? And are there any other smart wallet, magic things that you're trying out?
Yes. So the first feature we rolled out with is just bundled transactions. However, our smart wallet was built with gas sponsorship in mind, with session keys in mind. And so ultimately, we really want to explore the full design space of what a smart wallet will allow us to do. And so our team, spends a lot of time thinking about what is the next most important feature that we can launch, how can we best build this, but the actual implementation of our 7702 contract was thought about with all these decisions in mind. And those are the main two that I think we are thinking about right now. I think there's a few more actually on the horizons as well. But yes, ultimately we want to have as many of the key benefits of a 7702 wallet accessible to our users.
No more questions on Uniswap, I guess. That was very self-explanatory.
I'm so glad. We have a lot of data, that's for sure. So.
Yeah. All right.
Do you have a question?
Sure.
Is that people using Uniswap wallet or
Yes.
like using safes or something to interact with Uniswap? Like what do you
What are we?
like what do you mean when you say smart? Like how people like how people engaging with the smart wallet?
Yeah, great question. So when I talk about our smart wallets, I'm specifically focused on the Uniswap wallet, both mobile and extension. So we have mobile app and extension. Those two things kind of are just different platforms of the same thing. And no, I'm not. Yes, I'm talking about the Uniswap wallet specifically, though I should mention that like on the web app, actually, from day one, we have been, we basically made sure to include and allow for batched swaps. So if you do have either a 5792 or a 7702 implementation, or your wallet allows that, you will be able to benefit from that feature if you use our web app as well. So it was only we launched that since Pectra on May 7th, but it was only a few weeks ago that we actually rolled out our own 7702 implementation, and only last week we rolled it out to 100%, meaning all of our users have the ability to enable and delegate their wallet to our 7702 implementation. Yeah, it's not similar to a safe wallet, actually. It's essentially like our users have a like if you have an existing wallet, it's just a legacy UA. And what enabling allows you to do is delegate the code of your EOA to our 7702 contract, which has a bunch of features kind of in it. But essentially right now, it's basically a baseline, 7702 contract essentially that just allows you to basically, when you execute a transaction, you're executing through the code of that contract versus actually signing off on that transaction as just an EOA. So it's slightly different than what a safe is, but yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And we've been thinking about this for a long time. So we've been working on this for many, many months before Pector went live. And it's going to be something that we continue working on in the future as well. Cool.
Yeah? Okay. Okay, cool. So thanks, Grace, for a super comprehensive talk. I have a present for you. This is a sticker from the Index podcast, and it says, "I bet your BD team asked for this cumulative chart." Nice. Cool. So the last talk that being streamed here would be from Boxer. He will open up a debate floor. We will probably, after his talk, we will sit in a circle, we'll cut the stream, and starting debate about Solana, Ethereum, maybe, from the ecosystem level to the protocol level. But first, Boxer gonna try to compare, the data metrics and the, the talks around these two ecosystems. So you're free. You can use this one.
All right. So, how do I best start this? I guess, does REV allow us to compare crypto networks? And then specifically comparing Ethereum and Solana based on real economic value. And I guess for that, we need to know what real economic value is. And this has been a debate that's kind of been ongoing since, I would say, early February or something on Twitter. With lots of prominent voices kind of chipping their thoughts in. It's like, is REV a good metric? Is it a bad metric? So in this kind of presentation, I'm gonna try to just lay out the argument, and then I hope we can continue the conversation afterwards to see how does the room align on is this a good metric? Is this not a good metric? What should we do with the knowledge that we can maybe gain from looking at the Solana perspective of valuing networks? So yeah, there's a bunch of headlines on REV, and I don't know what happened with the formatting here. I hope that doesn't continue through the whole presentation, but it's been much reported on. Media is picking this up of hey, REV, and I think the bottom left one is Solana drafts Ethereum with record-breaking REV, and then but what does that mean? How can we interpret this? It's just one metric that somebody made up. And then on the other side, we have, of course, Sassal, the forever defender of Ethereum, saying REV is shit and we should not deal with this, and the ETH maxis will kill REV, and it's an irrelevant metric. So there's been a lively discussion, and then there's also takes okay, I think the basis of all of this is how do we value crypto networks, yeah, how do we value crypto networks, and what are the metrics that can maybe kind of facilitate evaluation like that? In traditional finance, you would look at a startup, you'd be okay, the startup has 50 million of revenue, we'll apply a PE ratio of 20, maybe it's a high-tech growth startup that's 20 to 50 is a reasonable amount. Sometimes there's weird things that happen, like Palantir going to a PE ratio of 1,400, but generally markets are rational, and what markets are always trying to assess is this asset produces profits. So how much do I how much do I think the future profits of this enterprise will be based on the growth rates and the current profitability? And we kind of need to So like this is more about like ETH the asset and Sol the asset. And like why is that actually important? And it's like we just chart these market caps against each other. I'm sure some of you are familiar, and like Ethereum nowadays is sitting at 300 billion, Solana just about under 100 billion. And yeah, Solana actually the price has been very volatile, but just because the issuance of Solana is actually, I think they're inflating at like 8% a year. So like the price can go down, but the market cap can still go up. But that in the end, that means like that the market actually, there's demand for like just buying up the assets that like are net issued. So yeah, but why is this important? Why do we actually care about the price of ETH? We've switched to a proof of stake system. I'm sure there's a lot of like people who are like more familiar with the economic security of ETH and like how all of that works. But the high level takes here, the higher the ETH market cap is, the more expensive it will be to 51% tag the network. And the rest is like just kind of downstream effects of that. Is like the lower the ETH price, the less the income of the validators is going to be. So it's like getting less attractive to actually run a validator, given the same issuance rate. Since the issuance rate is like denominated in ETH, right? It's not like, we're going to give out $3 million a year or like $5 billion a year. No, it's like we're giving out however many ETH a year. I don't know the number. But yeah, so these are like, that's why we care about the price of ETH. And I think the Ethereum ecosystem as a whole does not kind of care about the price of ETH. There's been a lot of conversations of like ETH is money or like ETH is oil or like ETH is whatever. But like in the end, I think like it's very peculiar to me that like, okay, like you transition your network to proof of stake, and then it's like, yeah, but like we don't care about the price. Like we're just like, oh, the mission is important, and like what? It's like, no, like you've made the bargain with the devil. Like you need to now care about the price. At least that would be my interpretation, and like hopefully we can discuss that later. But yeah, so why? So what is REV? Why should we care about REV? And also why REV might be stupid? And then we'll go into an open discussion of how do we resolve this? So yeah, what is real economic value? Really, the history of this is that Blockworks Research, or like Blockworks has a great research team. They're standardizing a bunch of metrics throughout the industry, or like especially REVs, like what they defined. And then if we just look through this table here, or like let's put it into words first, and then we can kind of look like what are the components of this. And it really is the sum of all fees that people are willing to pay for block space. And in Ethereum's case, that would be the base fees, the priority fees, the blob fees, and then also whatever is happening in MEV boost and on the Flashbot side, and like things that people pay out of protocol. And then if we kind of apply that same concept to Solana, we have the vote fees, we have the base, and we have the priority fees. So that's kind of like the core fees that you pay in Solana. And then in Solana, the MEV pipeline is called, or like, the MEV sidecar to the client is built by Jito, and therefore it's just called Jito tips. So like in Ethereum, we could call them Flashbot tips, but that doesn't really make sense. Jito kind of runs like a more integrated service where like, I don't know, I'm not super familiar with like how Jito works, but part of that revenue actually goes to Jito itself, and not like Flashbots doesn't take a cut, right? It's like, so like in Solana, it's like the MEV space is a bit more centralized. So much so that Jito actually like at one point recognized that they were harming the network and shut down part of their MEV operations, and disabled like a feature because they were recognizing that like people were getting sandwiched too much. But yeah, and then finally we can kind of look at, we could look at all blockchains, and like we could do this calculation for Tron and for Bitcoin and for all of these things, but for the purpose of this presentation, we're gonna focus on Ethereum, Solana, and OP stacks, or like Base specifically, since that's the most used L2 today, and I think most relevant to this discussion. And there, we just have L1 data fees, L2 base and priority fees. There's 0 MEV on base. I mean, there's MEV on base, but there's no out of protocol tips that would facilitate something like that. But yeah, so that's kind of like, okay, that's real economic value, and then we can actually kind of look at the specific things here, and I recognize that this will be hard to read from the back, so I can now read this out to you. It's gonna be a bit hard. So this is the Solana AV, and we can see that in May we basically land at a bit over 100 million in real economic value. So that's all the fees that people are paying on Solana to be included inside of the Solana block space. And then we can kind of see the makeup of this is, I would say like 30-40% priority fees, 50% G2 tips, and then base fee, vault fees, those make up about like 10%, something like that. So we can see that the G2 part of this, the MEV, like the part that people tip to kind of like get priority in the block space is actually very high. And on Ethereum in the past it's also been that high, but we'll get to that in a bit. Yeah, like a bit over 100 million, quite steady. Like this topped out at whatever 550 million in January when the Trump token launch was and the Libra token was, and the whole meme coin mania was just going crazy on Solana. And then obviously the meme coin market kind of died down afterwards. So like the REV revenue also down, or like the REV died down. But now it's kind of slowly picking back up as the markets are coming back. So kind of very reflexive in terms of like, this is very dependent on the market. There's not like some kind of fixed fee. This is very dependent on like what's actually happening on the blockchain at the moment. And then we can look at the same chart for Ethereum. So this is base fees, priority fees, MEV boost tips, and blob fees. And here I actually included the total. So this is 50 million. And we can see that the base fees actually make up 20 million, the priority fees make up also kind of 20 million, and then the MEV boost tips are just 7 million. So that just, I'm just kind of like laying the groundwork so we can all form proper arguments afterwards. Oh, and then there's blob fees as well with 112,000, which is fantastic. And then, oh, and I think one thing to mention is that REV for Ethereum was a lot higher before the blob upgrade, just because like the L2s were clogging the L1 with posting call data to the L1, right? And then as we kind of like got rid of the block space demand of the L2s posting the call data directly to the L1, we've seen a very, very dramatic decrease in the demand for block space or like block space on Ethereum, which is kind of bad for revenue for Ethereum. But all right, so. And then we can also look at base. And of course, in base, like the striking feature here is there's no MEV fees. And also, if we compare this to the other numbers, or like actually it's interesting. So Ethereum is earning 50 million, and then base is earning 5 million. And this is mostly driven by L2 priority fees. So like people are just kind of like, just the normal, how's the EIP called? I forgot when we last changed the gas calculations, but people just pay priority fees to be included earlier inside of the block, so the base sequencer picks them up in the next block. And Dening's research has kind of shown there's a lot of wastefulness there and whatever, but like we won't get too deep into that right now. And yeah, maybe. Oh yeah, and one other thing to call out here maybe is that. Before we had blobs on Ethereum, a significant part of the kind of fees that people would pay on base would be paid towards Ethereum 1, right? So like that was the call data that base needed to post. The revenue on this side from Ethereum actually was like we could also like see, or like we could see that as fees being paid on base. On the other side. So yeah, after the block upgrade, a lot of things kind of like slowed down on the Ethereum side. But okay, so that's kind of the introduction to REV and like, okay, why does this matter and what even does this try to describe? So why? So like now, okay, this is this is the sum of the block space that we pay for. And my thesis is quite simple. It's like blockchains are generally, or like the thesis of people that are fans of REV is quite simple, which is blockchains generally are in the business of selling block space. which does seem quite self-explanatory. It's like you build a network and you want people to use that network, and you want the demand for the block space in that network, or like you want there to be demand for the block space you're selling. Otherwise, like you'll never make a profit. And IV simply describes the sum of all fees paid for all in-protocol and out-of-protocol fees. So like the important thing here is like to also consider the MEV fees. I think that's like something, like if you ignore like, okay, people are willing to pay whatever, half of Solana's REV or however many million on Ethereum, I think 5 million or something like that, to be included in blocks, like that's not a, you haven't made a good argument if you just ignore that. So then, yeah, it's also, like I think why this metric is getting popular right now and why Blockworks has kind of, Blockworks runs an institutional research service, right? And they've been really pushing this metric. And it's like, they have institutions on the other side, and those institutions, they don't want to fucking look at 100 Dune dashboards. They don't want to like deal with all the complexities. They want simple like things. They're gonna look at TVL, active addresses. They're probably already smart enough, or like Blockworks is gonna tell them like, hey, this is probably not relevant. But like, what are other like numbers, metrics that we can make up that probably is a good indicator of like how successful is this blockchain at the moment? And REV is just one such metric that the team came up with. And that has found widespread adoption in the space and kind of like stirred up a lot of discussion. And it's something that we can actually kind of standardize between all of the different chains, right? Like if I measure active wallets in Solana versus active wallets on Ethereum versus active wallets on Tron versus active, none of this makes sense. Then we look at like stable coin transfer volume, since like I can run a bot on Base for like $50 a month that can inflate the volume to like millions and millions. It's like none of these metrics really matter. What matters is like, this is actual like user signal. Like if I am a PM, so like if you look at, I'm now a PM, if you look at user signals and like this is the revealed preferences of people of like what are they willing to pay to be included in the block space. So I think that's super relevant, and like that's just the economic kind of reality of the situation right now. Where it's like, okay, Ethereum, like people are only willing to pay whatever I said, 50 million to be included in the Ethereum block space in a month. And then on Solana, it's, and we can actually compare these numbers. And on Solana, it's 120 million. And then on Base, it's only 5 million. And then I think if we look at the entirety of the Ethereum ecosystem, it won't be that much more. Like if we're being like, of course, like you can now throw arguments of me of like, hey, you don't have this data for all the L2 chains, but I think there's enough people in the room who are kind of like familiar with this data. Maybe Arbitrum has like another 2-3 million. Maybe OP chain has like 500,000, and then but like the air gets very thin very fast. So really, this is the like. If we just think about like, okay, we've built all of these blockchain systems and there's all of these ecosystems and all of these millions of people, and like we're all here because we're fans of blockchains and we want this technology to spread and like enable, I don't know, a better world. This is the absolute reality of the, like, if you just look at this, it's like, yeah, people are willing to pay much more money to be included in the Solana block space. So there's much more kind of like, this is currently the winning system. That could be an argument that you could make. Shit. We have a problem here. But we can stay calm. Why might REV be stupid? What are the arguments against the REV? So first of all, first come, first serve rollups have no MEV bribes. So as I mentioned earlier, on Base or something like this, we'll get to questions in the end. There's no, like you can't bribe the Base sequencer. So like even though there might be demand to like pay the Base sequencer, to bribe the Base sequencer, there might be send bridges to be had, there might be, I don't know, some MEV opportunities on Base that might be great. You can never have them. And then Ethereum has widespread usage of MEV protected RPCs and swaps. So this is what Denning talked about earlier in the day. We can kind of see that a lot of the order flow of decentralized exchanges and kind of DEX swaps are one of the main things that people can extract MEV with, or like it's one of the more valuable kind of use cases of blockchains today. So we can see that actually a lot of the order flow of decentralized exchanges today lands in private mempools and therefore is MEV protected. So like if we think about our concept of how we calculate REV, it's actually like not like it's just protected. Like there's no such protections on Solana. So like even if you want to do a MEV protected swap on Solana, I think there's some like early solutions. Okay. Okay. So we're getting a comment from the audience that most of G2's revenue. Okay, so a portion of G2's revenue is people being protected from MEV attacks or like protecting themselves from MEV attacks, and not just sandwich attackers trying to sandwich other people. Yeah. So people are starting to recognize there is like there's an MEV problem on Solana, and they're starting to protect against it. But still, most of the retail flow is still like pretty exposed. No? Okay. Maybe he's just derailed my talk, but I'll just keep going. But yeah, so maybe we can't really compare apples to apples here because these ecosystems are just fundamentally different. Because Solana maybe is not that advanced in its MEV protection. Maybe there's not that many out of protocol solutions, and I think fundamentally it's just different activities and different users have different REV profiles. So if we, and here's a bunch more L2 REV. I don't know how that ended up here. But if we look, this chart is a bit misaligned. So let's just kind of recall, this is Solana REV. Over 50% of this is due to G2 tips. Like a lot of priority fees, very few base fees, very few vote fees. So that's just kind of the basic operations of the blockchain. And then we look at, okay, we can actually kind of like, this is a Dune query. This is weekly DEX volumes over the last year or so. And we can see currently Binance has like a really big spike because Binance has integrated DEXs into their centralized exchange, but that's not the story here. I just wanted to kind of like compare, okay, like how does the Solana DEX volumes, how does that stack up against the Ethereum volumes and also against all layer 2 volumes? So I think like if you kind of ignore this Binance chart, it kind of seems to be like half of the DEX volume today is like on ETH layer 2s. And then half of, or like Ethereum mainnet and its layer 2s, and then the other half is basically on Solana. And then everything centralized exchanges, I don't have any idea about. But that's like we're just looking at RIV at the moment, so that's the argument I'm trying to make here. And then if we look at Solana DEX volume over the last 30 days, we can see that about 60%, 70% of the volume is just PumpSwap. So PumpSwap famously being the meme coin launchpad on Solana. So the DEX activity on Solana is being driven by meme coins, and then we can actually look at this in Sol DEX pair categories. So this is also curated by Walker's Research. They've made a chart and they basically categorize all like the equivalent of ERC20s, like just the tokens that are being traded on Solana. And you can see that 60 billion volume, or is it 60? It's even more. Almost 80 billion volume in May have been contributed by meme coins. And then there's another like maybe 50 million, which is other kind of project-based or Sol stablecoin-based trading pairs. So most of the activity on Solana is really driven by memes. It's just how to read this chart, and then Sol stablecoins. It's probably like a second order effect of like the people trading like memes. So it's like you trade whatever. All the pump.swap all pump swap tokens trade against Sol, and like even all of these newer launch pads, they also trade against Sol. So like these traders will enter their trades via Sol meme coin, but then as they exit, they actually go to USDC or USDC on Solana mostly. So like most of the trading activity on Solana is probably just because Solana is a decentralized casino, which is great. So kind of like these are the arguments against REV. Maybe the MEV argument is a bit out of maybe it's a bit old. So in the end, I think, or like what we can kind of make of these two sides of the argument is, I don't think REV alone is the solution. So like REV is a snapshot in time and there's low prediction power. So like, what if the SEC actually starts investigating PumpSwap tomorrow? Like, what if meme coins are just, I don't know, they're going out of favor? Like the Ethereum, or like we as the Ethereum community thought that like the NFT ecosystem would grow forever and like everything's gonna be great and there's so much revenue that we're making because all of these gas intensive applications are on Ethereum mainnet, and it's like nothing lasts forever. We don't know where this meme coin thing is gonna go, and it's like this is super reflexive. A lot of the REV like revenue or like the REV depends on the meme coins. So it's like, what do we do with this long term? Yeah, what if people start crying in the casino, basically? But REV sets the baseline for how much budget the network can pay for security, besides the inflation. So like the market caps that I showed in the very beginning, I think they're closely related to REV, or like there's kind of like a downstream metric of REV, which is like, okay, how much can you actually pay your stakers and operators and stuff like that. And yeah, that's, so like there isn't one thing here, and so okay, we can kind of calm down. So there's more metrics you can use to kind of like assess blockchain health, and like this is like 4 different talks that you could have, but it's like, okay, the average stablecoin supply per day or per month, in which Ethereum is absolutely smashing it. It's still 50% of the stablecoins are on Ethereum, even more than on Tron, which was actually surprising to me to find out in this research, in the research for this presentation. And then like Solana is somewhere like, it's the pink bar on top, and it's like it's pretty small. So like not that many stablecoins on Solana, even though lots of people have been trying to like increase the supply of stablecoins on Solana. And then we can also look at TVL. Of course, you can have arguments for and against TVL, but it's still like, okay, Ethereum is still at 58% of TVL and all of crypto. So it's like, okay, calm. We can calm down. So maybe REV is a really bad metric for valuing L1 assets, and it's now time for that to die. But there's one more thing, and I think if we look back at the ETH REV and we think about what the roadmap was until very recently, it's like we have the blob fees with 112,000 down here, and this was supposed to be the future of kind of the network security and how Ethereum scales and how Ethereum sustains itself. So I think this is very, very problematic, and thankfully the Ethereum Foundation has now recognized, like, hey, we need to actually scale the L1. There needs to be transaction fees that people actually pay for these things. We need to make the block space be in demand, and like we need to stay the place where the most TVL lives, and we need to have the high value applications. If somebody wants to deposit 100 million into Aave, they should do that on Ethereum mainnet. There should be space for it. So I think, yeah, we can't really say this. I think in the end, the economic security budget that you acquire through having valuable block space that you can sell is very important. So yeah, if you have another view of like the income through block fees is an absolute joke. This is a Sankey diagram of the all the fees, or like this is a Sankey diagram, the split out parts of REV, and how it kind of flows through the ETH ecosystem. And if you look at how little the blob fees are contributing to this. This is an absolute disaster. Ethereum is giving away valuable kind of networking capacity of their validators for free, which is not great. But on the other side, we need to like build L2s, and like if you make the blob space very expensive from the start, like nobody will ever build on it. So I don't know. It's all hard problems. I'm just pointing this out. So yeah, this might be the actual the full picture. And with that, we had panic again. So yeah, but yeah, there's no silver bullets. IV should be taken into consideration. It should probably not be optimized for. I'm gonna finish soon. We really can't ignore it. I think the like Sasa saying like publicly on Twitter like, hey, we like what the fuck, REV is a bad metric. Like, you're just fooling yourself, bro. Like we need to secure this network. Like, there's no way we can ignore this. But I think the Solana people on the other side should really kind of consider like, what is my REV actually made up of, and how long can this party go on? So yeah, I guess the end of this is really like, how do we value ETH or SOL? It's really hard questions. The data cannot answer this. Everyone needs to find their own model and what they're comfortable with. And yeah, are these assets a money, a commodity, a stock? Nobody really knows. I think the fact that the space is now at least thinking about like, hey, is this thing making revenue? Is this sustainable? Can we kind of build a long-term business with these things? Runways are not infinite. Money actually costs money again. Zero interest rates are over. I think those are like, it's a very good aspect, and actually shows me that the industry is kind of maturing, and like more like financial players are coming into the space who want these kinds of metrics, and they will just blindly apply them. So I think it's a good development. But yeah, let's keep discussing this and see where we land.
Thank you for the talk. Super interesting data breakdown and stuff. So I want to invite the room to kind of like divide. If you want to split the seating a little bit, maybe like this side is Ethereum people and this is the Solana side. And I want to maybe start the debate, and we will have to keep the time around like 10 minutes max. And then we will go to the trivia part. But I want to say, I invited a roast master, Jonah. And so I want to ask your, comments first. Like, what are the hot takes you have heard from this talk?
What are the what?
Hot takes.
I didn't find the arguments against REV compelling. I mean, if you go back to the slide, I can run through them. Like if I'm like a shop and I sell my product for half the price, I'm still gonna be judged on my profits, right? So like, just because Ethereum's able to give you a transaction and you don't have to pay for MEV doesn't mean that therefore it's comparing apples to oranges, right? Like, if there's two businesses and one makes more profit, the one that makes more profit is a better business, even if it's selling each product for cheaper. So that's number one. When it comes, like, I don't see why like decomposing the different stuff that goes, the components of REV particularly matters. I mean, at the end of the day, like you're trying to compare demand for block space, and that's the thing you're selling. And that comes to the fourth point as well. And when it comes to rollups, no MEV bribes. I mean, MEV is captured in rollups via spam, right? So if you look at Base, the majority of transactions, because there's no MEV pipeline, are basically people spamming, and then the rollups actually internalize the REV via, or MEV via priority fees. So you actually are capturing it. So it's captured in a different way, and we're just labeling things differently. So it seems like there's pretty good arguments against every single point there.
I just want to clarify that I'm just the messenger here. I'm trying to lay out.
Well, but also, yeah.
No. It's great arguments. It's great arguments. This would make a great V2 of this presentation.
Yeah, I just find that like a lot of like the anger against REV is cope, and then like what's funny then is then people now want to define like the value of Ethereum by the TVL it's supporting, which is weird. That's like saying, well, if a bank stores $1 trillion, therefore the bank must be worth more than $1 trillion. But like, if I said that argument, everyone would think that's stupid, right? Just the money in someone else is storing for you doesn't mean how much they're, right? So it doesn't make any sense. And importantly, so TVL is a backwards-looking metric. So if you look at, for example, stablecoins, Ethereum might have more stablecoin supply, but Solana has more stablecoin transactions. And as a blockchain, you only are able to charge on a transaction. So if you actually look at the amount of economic value to stablecoins are generating for a network, Solana's kicking Ethereum's ass, frankly. I just don't think supply is interesting. If anything, supply is a drain on network because it means the network requires more security to keep up with that supply. And if the supply is not paying back fees in the form of like velocity, then the supply is in some sense parasitic and not a net good for the network. So I reject the stablecoin supply as being an interesting point.
Okay, I actually agree with like the thing you said, like the MEV still exists regardless if it's sidecar or just priority fee, like it's just different representation of it. But what do you think of the, you know, like the everything kind of is driven by meme coin activity and it could be short-lived. Even the stable coin, like how to say, transaction volume, it's probably because people are swapping, you know, like Trump to USDC there as well, right?
Ethereum in its heyday was basically all NFTs, and no one was complaining about that then. I think that also if you're looking at major pairs, so you're looking at the short tail of assets, Solana is increasingly dominating there, which is important. Also, when it comes to the more kind of apples to apples comparison, like a Camino, which is Solana's version of lending, for less TVL makes way more more revenue, so it's better business models built on Solana. So I just think things are changing, and judging the meme coin thing also feels like hope. And importantly, I think a lot of people in Ethereum don't call things meme coins that are meme coins. Like you have projects that the core team isn't there anymore and they don't generate any revenue, and for some reason that's considered a major coin, but it's no better than a meme coin, right? So like I also think that like we're quick to call like WIF a meme coin, but not some other project that clearly is a meme coin. So I just think it's a little bit of intellectual dishonesty.
Yeah, the point that one of the points that you made some good points, but I think there was a third one that flagged my attention, which was the idea that we already have a good idea on L2's like base of how much people are willing to pay for MEV, because you know all of these bots pay priority fees to spam the network and doing all of that. I think that I'm not totally sold on the idea that this priority fee paying represents the full scope of what people would be willing to pay for to engage in MEV, because I mean if Base or other L2s were to have auctions, we've seen the case on Ethereum L1 where searchers are willing to pay up to 90% of their profits to get included, right? And I feel like what they're paying in priority fees now is probably still a very small percentage of what they would be willing to pay if they had to compete against each other in an auction. And of course, you made the argument of, well, this is a metric that measures what's happening today. You're a good business based on what you're doing today. Why does it matter what you could potentially theoretically capture? And then I guess that comes back to what the purpose of Rev is, because if we're comfortable with it just being a snapshot of who's top today, then that's perfectly fine. But if we want to use it to value networks in the long term and say, oh, we're going to use this to justify, say, the valuation of a token, then I think that it does actually matter what is the actual potential amount that could be paid as opposed to what it is today, because valuations usually are based on like forward-looking, what is the potential, what's the growth of the future of the network and stuff.
For sure, but like again, this debate is Ethereum versus Solana. So if Base started charging for MEV, none of that fees would go to Ethereum, right? All of that would be captured by the L2, and as we saw in the Uniswap talk before, effectively the amount of fees an L2 pays L1 is divorced from the value that L2 generates. So yes, maybe the L2s can become better businesses. By the way, they're for-profit businesses that are separate than Ethereum, but none of that value is going to Ethereum. So again, on like so even if you believe that L2s can generate more value in REV, it has nothing to do with Ethereum, the Base asset. So just an orthogonal argument. So I'm happy to debate whether or not in the limit Base is better than Solana, but that's a different conversation than Ethereum versus Solana.
No, I think that is a good point, because you are right that in the argument I was presenting, if L2 start capturing more of the value, it doesn't necessarily mean that Ethereum will immediately start capturing a ton of value as well.
It's actually an interesting one, because in particular, this is value that 100% doesn't go to the L1, right? So if an L2 runs like a MEV auction, that is 100% value that's not captured by the L1. In fact, to make it even scarier, because we don't really know how to run MEV auctions in protocols particularly well, see like all the ePBS or PBS or APS research is typically at a protocol. Most of the MEV value that would be captured by an L2 if it's not via priority fees would probably go to the equity side of the business, which means will actually never be given back to the token holders of those L2s. So if anything, it's probably net bad for the token holders if the MEV gets taken out and has separate auctions for it. So yeah, so it's actually probably worse for token holders.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add is that I don't think looking at meme coin revenue is necessarily cope, just because like the Ethereum ecosystem didn't consider it during the NFT boom. Because maybe we should look at how the ecosystem did consider NFTs during the NFT boom a mistake, right? We didn't, or the ecosystem didn't really say that, oh yeah, this is mostly just like scams and frauds, and like people are not gonna like want to pay for this long term, so it's not like sustainable revenue model. And I think a similar framework applies to meme coins. And I think you're very correct that there's maybe a lot of projects on Ethereum that are like similarly valueless. I just don't think they comprise as much revenue of Ethereum as it does in Solana, and I think that's a valid
Well, to
thing
push
analyze.
back on the meme coin point, if you look at Phantom as a wallet or the wallets on Solana, in totality, they have more users than Ethereum users now, and the meme coins brought people in top of funnel. So even if meme coins went away today, the most users now do not exist on Ethereum, but on other networks. That's number one. Number two is because of the meme coin craze, you've actually seen a huge push to more, what you would consider legitimate activities. So you're seeing increasingly amounts of majors being traded on Solana in respect to Ethereum. At this point, Jupiter is doing more volume than Uniswap is. At this point, you have major organizations like BlackRock and Apollo putting like actual real assets on Solana. So yeah, maybe meme coins are not going to be a thing forever, but it actually set the groundwork for pretty good network effects and very legitimate business coming to the platform.
I would also disagree with that part. I don't have the data right now, but
BlackRock didn't go to Solana?
no, not the BlackRock part, but that meme coins is a good way to onboard users and build good customer relationships with users and retain them long term to do more like quote unquote serious things on chain. Like I forget the exact stat. Maybe it was like just a snapshot or wrong picture, but I saw something about like the user retention of people who onboard to different wallets because of meme coins is actually very low, and they don't stay around for long after they've lost their first like $1,000 on meme coins.
I think that's like a weird argument because you would have had to levy that against Ethereum, is the truth, right?
Sorry, what do you mean?
Like, wouldn't that have been a good argument against Ethereum? Like, it doesn't.
I mean, it would have been, right? Like a lot of users like left and never came back after the NFT boom.
I would
right?
argue like the worst user experience or the reason you wouldn't come back is if you want to make an $100 transfer and it costs you $30.
Yeah, definitely. That's also an argument why maybe we lost a lot of users during the NFT boom.
I'd rather lose $1,000 gambling than $1,000 to transfer 100.
Yeah, maybe, but that's not the case anymore. I'm speaking about like what is the case like right now.
But it's only cheaper now, not because there's fundamental fixes, but because there's no activity.
Sure.
I have one problem with REV because I think like it doesn't capture one component of the economic value that actually also being captured, which is like the front end fees. All the like wallets and like Uniswap are charging, or like I guess that may not be a strong case for Ethereum because Jupiter and Phantom Power is also generating a lot of fee. But still, I think that could be a critique of the metrics.
Yeah, I mean, if the argument is that a lot of value is captured by the like actual applications, not the chain itself, that's great. But then, I mean, the numbers suggest that you make better money on Solana as an application in Ethereum. So then it would strengthen Solana. But for what it's worth, I prefer Ethereum. Like I sound like such a bear. like I like the values of Ethereum better. I want Ethereum to win, and I think Ethereum can get better. I just think that like in order to get better, you have to recognize a problem. Like I prefer the vision of the world that Ethereum has of like a decentralized base, something that is like nation state resistant, something that actually cares about centralization concerns. Like Solana isn't perfect, but we have to be honest if you want to solve a problem. And like I think trying to like redefine terms or trying to like lie about a problem or like say, well, actually, if you think like when it's not true, like be honest with the problem so you can actually solve it. I think this is completely fixable for what it's worth. Like I think Ethereum can get better, and I'm not trying to be a doomsday person. In fact, I'm giving a talk I think on Friday about how Ethereum can get better for what it's worth. So I guess that's like a plug.
Okay, we can all calm down. All right, I think that is the end of this
Debate.
discussion. Thank you, Jonah. That
Thank
was
you.
super good
Yeah.
insights.
Yeah.
Couldn't have made those arguments better myself, as you saw.
Yep. So
yeah. Thanks everyone for participating, and
yeah, thanks for setting up, all those arguments and as well the big talk. So we have one last part of the day, and we kind of runs late, so I'm gonna just say whoever want to take a break, go ahead. But I'm gonna start to present you this Ethereum trivia that I'm really excited about, and. Dolby and Grace will hand over a bunch of papers where everyone can grab one if you want to participate. I promise it's going to be super fun, and especially if you're going to be an Ethereum OG, a lot of these are kind of like historical, quiz. And I already did this once in the Zoo Garden, and I was going to revamp the whole question list, but I thought a lot of them are actually really fun, so I kept kind of recycled some of them. But some of the answers might have changed already, in terms of the metrics of L2, etc. So we will just run it now, and we'll have mysterious, gifts for the winners and all the participants. And we have a bunch of pen as well, and we will hand it over to everyone in a minute. And so when you participate, I want you to write down both the number of the question and also the answer next to the number. And when we finish, nobody can, check ChatGPT or search online. That's not illegal. And when we finish, I will ask you to hand over your paper next to it, the person next to you. And so you're gonna, review everyone's questions for each other. Okay, so let's start. There's 30 questions, so it might take actually 30 minutes or more. And for the audience, I guess we are streaming still. If you want to participate, do you think we can also stream this part? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah, it's for our streaming audience. If you want to participate and DM me after on Twitter, tell me what's your points. I will try to give you the gifts as well. So let's see. All right. Try again. Okay. Has everyone got a pen and paper yet? I'm gonna start with the first question. We will have some simple questions, right? Like for example, this one. It's obviously, who wrote the Ethereum white paper. So, but we will go over and get more and more degen. Yeah. Some of the answers might be buried in some of the talks today already. So, first question is, who wrote the Ethereum white paper? You will write down their name, either one person or multiple if you think there is. Write down the name. Make sure the spelling is correct. Yeah. And write a number 1 next to it. So the person who is reviewing your results will know which answers to which question. So who wrote the Ethereum white paper? Okay, the second question. Who wrote the Ethereum yellow paper? You will write down their name as well. So 2 and then the name. It might be the same person, but it may not be 2. So the third question, what was DeFi called before it's called DeFi? So what was the name for DeFi when it just started, before everyone's calling it DeFi? Yeah, if you were around, 2018, 2019, what people were calling it? Okay, number 4, what are the most 2 common used ERC types for NFT? What's the most 2 common used ERC standards token type for NFTs? So ERC something, ERC something. Okay, I'm seeing people are discussing, so it's fine. Number 5, when did the merge happen? You have to put down the year, the month, and the date. When did the merge happen? Exactly. Yeah. When did the merge happen? Yeah, it kind of happened in Berlin, actually. At least I was here. Okay, okay. Number 6, which chain has mempool? Ethereum, Optimism, Base, Polygon, Tyco. For just a hint, Tyco is the base to roll up. And if you remember what David said in the morning, yeah. So which chain has mempool? Ethereum, Optimism, Base, Polygon, or Tyco? The answer can be multiple, by the way. So you have to write down like, multiple results. Okay, number 7. What does DAO stand for? You have to spell it correctly. What does DAO stand for? DAO. What are the words for the name? What's the full name it stands for? I mean, it's kind of dead, but. Okay, cool. Number 8. Is it wrong? Good. Okay, number 8. Which one is related to account abstraction? Okay, so it's kind of tricky one, and it kind of has a trap in it. So, A, EIP 4337, B, EIP 7702, and 3, EIP 3047, and D, ERC 4337. It can be multiple again. Yeah. If anyone want to bribe a coffee for the answer, he's like in the front. On base, right? Okay, number 9. Where was DevCon 4 held? Where was DevCon 4? Yeah, so Thailand was DevCon 7. So where was DevCon 4 held? I believe it was 2018. Just a hint. Yeah. Okay, number 10. What was the fork called that created Ethereum Classic? Or like, what was the, whatever the event name is, like what happened and caused like a fork that had Ethereum Classic? Okay, number 11. What was the first order book DEX on Ethereum? Yeah, I mentioned to you when we were chatting, but yeah. What was the first? You still have to spell it right. So what was the first order book DEX on Ethereum? Are we good? The first order book DEX on Ethereum. Okay. Number 12. Who was the miner that mined the last proof of work block on Ethereum? Like you have, the name is okay, the format, but you have to get the name. Like it's a mining pool back in the POW day. Who was the last miner that mined the block before it transitioned to POS on the merge day? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. They put a message in the transaction. I will show you guys. Okay, even if you don't have answer for it, make sure you mark the number, yeah? Okay, number 13. What was the famous DEX launched with a Windows Retro UI? Yeah, this one easy, right? They're still around. I don't know how many people are using that UI, but they kind of like abandoned that UI at some point. Yeah? What was the famous DEX with the Windows Retro UI? Okay, number 14. What was the first interactive Solidity learning game called? If anyone have played it, it was like a Solidity game. Like basically, you can play this game and learn Solidity. Okay. Somebody's writing hard. I'm seeing there. Okay, number 15. What was the first Ponzi scheme game on Ethereum? Like this Ponzi scheme kind of like clogged the whole chain, kind of. A Ponzi scheme game. Well, but this is particularly a thing where it's like, if you put in money, this amount, you will get 2x back, and everyone, yeah. And then you have to basically, be early because the last people are the one that's getting nothing back, right? Okay, what was the first Ponzi scheme game on Ethereum? Yeah. Okay, number 17. How many EIPs were shipped in the Pectra upgrade? Oh, 16. How many EIPs were shipped in the Pectra upgrade? Is there 10 or 11 or 12 or 13? Yeah. How many EIPs? There was a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. It's getting more and more data. So, number 17. Which layer 2 has the highest fee paid by user in the last 90 days? Well, yeah. Well, Lorenz just left, so otherwise he could have. Yeah. Like the answers are on Grow the Pie. So, which L2 has the highest fee paid by user in the last 90 days? Arbitrum, Bayes, Optimism, Linea, ZK Sync. I mean, this is basically like what's the highest. It's just like how highest the L2 revenue in the last 90 days. So, okay. 18, which L2 has the highest TVL? L2 TVL. So Arbitrum, Bayes, Optimism, Linea, ZK Sync. A hint is that there are two chains super close to each other, so it's very tricky, this question. Okay, 19. How many layer 2s have reached stage 1? So there 5 layer 2s, 6, 7, 8. Can anyone define stage 1? I grabbed the can.
Stage 1 means you have a working proof system, you have first transactions, and you have a security council for emergency upgrades. A security council is defined as a multisig that has at least a 75% threshold and a diverse enough set of members, meaning from different entities.
Okay, thank you. How many? Yeah. How many layer 2s have reached that stage 1? 5, 6, 7, 8. Pick your number. And then number 20, which of the following is currently not proposed as a candidate EIP for Glamsterdam? So EIP 7732 EPBS, enshrined payload block separation. EIP 7805 FOSSO, fork choice enforced inclusion lists. EIP 7886 delayed execution. EIP 7782 reduced block latency from 12 seconds to 6 seconds. If you pay attention to like the talks in the first and second day from like Dankred and Barnaby, I think this could be easier. So if you don't know the answer, just pick a random one, to be honest. Yeah. All right. Number 21, who spends the most gas on Ethereum within 1 year? A, Wintermute, B, Jared from Subway, C, SCP, Symbolic Capital Partners, D, Citadel, E, Hildalby. He might be a really crazy whale degen. Yeah. Yeah. It's roughly the same in the past few years. Yeah. Let's say the last 1 year. Who spent the most gas on Ethereum? All right. 22. Which L2 posts the second most blobs since Duncan upgrade? Second most blobs. Arbitron, Word Chain, Base, OP Mainnet, Tyco. Again, think about the talk from the morning from David. The second most blobs posted by L2. All right. Next, 23. What's the scale of total value restaked on eigenlayer today? So what's the eigenlayer TVL? 0.1 billion, 1 billion, or 10 billion, or 100 billion? So what's the eigenlayer TVL? You think 0.1 is even too much? That would be 100 million, right? So. Okay. Okay, write down your answer. Yeah. And then 24, how many authors are on the Uniswap white papers? So this one's a troll, and I copied it from one of the roasting Ethereum comedy happened in DevCon, but I really like this one because it's kind of funny. So if you can write out how many authors' name are on the white paper of Uniswap for V1, V2, V3, V4, and Unichain, just write a bunch of numbers and write like when we score it, like anything. Yeah, just make sure you write, a bunch of comma, and so you know what number you're writing for which paper. So, yeah, for each one. So like for V1, how many author? For V2, how many author? For V3, how many? And each of them can be 1 point later when we score them. Yeah. Okay, so 5 numbers. Comma separated. Yeah. Okay, 25. What's the highest percentage of staked ETH source right now? So like among all the ETH staked on Ethereum, some of them are like solo stakers that are running validator, putting their ETH on their validator. Some are through like staking services, some are through liquid staking services, some are through liquid restaking services, or some are using like centralized institution staking. So what is the biggest source of staked Ethereum right now among ABCDE? The solo staker or staking or liquid staking or restaking or centralized exchange staking. Okay, now 26. How many active validators for Ethereum right now? Is it 100K, 300K, 500K, 800K, or more than 1 million? How many active validators does Ethereum have right now? Yeah. Okay, 27. How many meme coins have launched on Pump.fun? So is it 37,000 or 137,000 or 1.1 million or 11 million or 113 million? How many tokens have launched on Pump.fun? Yeah. Okay, 28. Which NFT had the highest trading volume in the last 30 days on OpenSea, specifically on Ethereum? So is it CryptoPunks or Milady or Pudgy Penguin or Bored Ape? All of them are pretty good. One of them are particularly cool. Okay, which NFT has the highest trading volume in the last 30 days on Ethereum on OpenSea? Just on OpenSea. Yes. It's like you go to OpenSea website and you look at the metrics. Okay. Okay, 29. Which coin is not in the top 5 by market cap? XRP or BNB or SOL or Ethereum or USDT? So like basically what are the, among this list, which one is not top 5? There's one in this list, I'll just give it away. And the top one is Bitcoin and it's not here, right? Like so one of this is not in the top 5 by market cap. So which one is not top 5? Okay. All right, last question. So we know that like there are rewards from the consensus layer, comes from like attestation and like the sync committee, like as being a validator. There's also rewards from the execution layer for like gas priority fee and MEV tip. So what is the split ratio between the execution and consensus rewards in last 30 days for Ethereum? Is 90 to 10 or 70 to 30 or 50-50 or 30 to 70 or 10 to 90? So as in like, you know, validators are getting rewards from both execution layer and consensus layer. Which one do you think is like bigger than the other, or like maybe they are similar? Yeah. I mean, you kind of basically measure like the whole, how big of an industry it is for staking services, right? Like if you look at consensus layer rewards, and MEV is kind of like a subset of like the execution layer rewards, you know, as a sub-industry. Okay, everyone got their answers? Cool, and so now find someone next to you to review your score. Yeah. Can I go back? 26, okay. This is, how many active validators for Ethereum right now? Okay. Okay, are we ready for the answers? Have everyone find a reviewer? Okay. So we'll go through the answers now. First question, it's Vitalik, who wrote the white paper. Vitalik. I mean, if you said Vitalik without last name, it's okay, right? Like, it's the same person. Are we ready? Yeah? We got answering? Okay, cool. Second question, who wrote the yellow paper? Anyone? Okay, Gavin Wood. But he's doing Polkadot now, so, yeah. Yeah. So, all right, cool. What was the DeFi called before it's DeFi? Open Finance. Yeah. Ring a bell? Yeah. Okay. What's the most common standard for NFT? ERC 721, ERC 1155. So. Okay, number 5. When was the merge? It was 2022, September 15. Yeah. Make sure you get the right exact date, yeah? It's supposed to be the exact right date, yeah? 2022, September 15. No, you don't get half points, no. No buffer. No. You have to real align to know the date. Yeah. All right, which chain has mempool? So Ethereum has mempool, Polygon has mempool, Tyco-based rollup also have a mempool. OPM-based are a single sequencer with no mempool. So if you get the answer ADE, then you are correct. No half points. No half points. Okay. What does DAO stand for? It's Decentralized Autonomous Organization. And if you do the Z instead of S, it's fine. So, Decentralized Autonomous Organization. And number 8, which one is related to account abstraction? It's like all of them, but if you get only, wait, why not? Why you think not? So like, wait, I've heard somebody told me every ERC is a EIP. Okay, yeah. So there was a debate last time about this, but somebody educated and I looked it up as well. Like every ERC can be considered as an EIP. Like you have. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, I think like there's controversy here. Either you get ABCD or you get BCD is both fine. Yeah. So, but you have to get ABCD or BCD. Yeah. Cool. So the next is DevCon 4 was in Prague. Yeah. Yeah. 3 was in Cancun. Yeah. Yeah. And then like 5 was Osaka, I think. And then 6 was Bogota. No, wait, is Bogota DevCon or DevConnect? Both DevCon, yeah. Okay, so Prague. Wait, what you saying? Cool, thank you. 10, the fork that made Ethereum Classic is the DAO hack or the DAO fork. Yeah. Yeah. All right. 11, the first order book DEX was Ether Delta. Ether Delta, and doesn't matter the capitalize or not. Okay, 12, the miner mined the last proof of work block is F2 pool. Yeah, F2 pool. And I want to show this, basically, this was the block, last POW block. And it's by F2 pool, old, it was like Chinese signature. And there's one transaction in this block. And in that transaction, they wrote a message. It was basically saying, some like a statement, say you make the commitment and nature will respond to that commitment by removing impossible obstacle during the impossible dream, and the word will not grind you under, it will lift you up. This is the trick. Yeah. Yeah, I think it also, I mean, my understanding of this is like, it kind of represents the, how to say, conviction of, Ethereum trying to really transition towards like resources saving, like no longer like mining with a lot of energy consumption, so. They sell that NFP. Should I try open this? Okay. Let's see. Oh, what's going on here? Oh, should I do like HTTP? Or does anyone know what's the format? Is this correct? Wait, I think we haven't got the format right. I hope Sarah's here. Oh, okay. And then /IPFS again. And that's it. I think we're not getting it right, but okay, we can check after, but yeah. Okay, next one, the first Windows ritual UI is curve.5. Curve 5, yeah, curve. Curve is fine, yeah. And then number 14, it was Crypto Zombies. It was a Solidity game. It was pretty interesting. It looks like the zombie and plants game, yeah. And then number 15, the first Ponzi scheme is FOMO 3D. Yeah. Yeah, maybe I think some people are getting CryptoKitty, but I think it's FOMO 3D first. I mean, CryptoKitty is not a Ponzi, so. Yeah, but it was a game that clogged the chain, yeah. I mean, it was an NFT that clogged in. So how many EIP was shipped in the Pectra upgrade? 11, and these are all 11. And then number 17, the L2 has the highest fee paid by user. Last 19 day is base. So highest L2 revenue in the last 90 days is base. But for number 18, the highest TVL is Arbitron. It's pretty crazy. Oh, well, okay, look at this chart from Grow the Pie. It's like base and Arbitron is like just, sometimes base is up a little bit, and then today Arbitron is higher. Yeah, yeah. So Arbitron is A, yeah. And then number 19, how many L2 reached the stage 1? It's 7. So Base, Arbitron, Optimism, Unichain, Scroll, Starknet, Inc. have 7. Stage 1 L2. Okay, number 20, reduced block latency from 12 second to 6 second is not considered yet by Glamsterdam so far. Everything else is considered in Glamsterdam. So EPBS, Fossil, and delayed execution. Okay, 21. Jared from Subway is the highest spender by gas. He's the biggest sandwicher, like MEV sandwich searcher. Yeah, Jared from Subway.east in 1 year. Okay. All right. 22. Tycho is the L2 post, the second most blobs since Dencon. Well, Tycho like posted as a base rollup, posted every. Yeah. Well, check your own dashboards. We should. Yeah. And then so next, the 23 eigenlayer TVL is 10 billion right now. Yeah, 10 billion. Okay, 24. So how many authors are on the Uniswap white papers? There was like obvious inflation. I was like, the first one was from. So guys, so for this one, there are 5 answers here. If you get any of them in for the right white paper, you get 1 point. Okay. So for V1, there was 1 author, V2 3, V3 5, and V4 there's 10 author, and the Unichain there's 12 authors. If you want to see it here, like Uniswap V1 white paper comes from like Hayden's Hack MD, and then V2 had Hayden, Noah, and Dan Robinson, and then V3 had 2 more authors, and V4 just like instantly inflated. And then Unichain has even more, some people also contributed from OP Labs and Flashbots. So the answer is 1, 3, 5, 10, 12. So if you get any of them correctly for the right position, you're getting points. If you get 5 of them, you get 5 points. Okay, 25. What's the highest percentage of a staked ETH source right now? It's liquid staking. Yeah, it's liquid staking, which is C, and it's coming from Dolby's dashboards again. And caveats is that there is a good amount of, like 20% of source, it's unidentified, so it's not liquid. Okay, so it's likely central exchange, which means this answer could be flipped, right? Right, it's possible, yeah. It's most likely, okay. So when you push that spell book, the answer is different again, maybe. Yeah. Well, yeah, for now, what we know is that it's liquid staking. Yeah. So the answer is C. Okay. 26, there's more than 1 million active validators on Ethereum right now. And this number kind of dropped slightly, like from 1.07 to 1.05 after Pectra, because there's like a consolidation feature. So and like the average staked amount went up from 32 to 32.4 or something, but it kind of went back to 1.07 now per checked from Beacon Chain Explorer. And then, so yeah, the answer is E. Okay, so 27, there is 11 million tokens have launched so far on Pump.fun. Oh, really? I just checked on June. It's 12. Okay, yeah, it's probably E already now. Yeah, yeah, it's 11 million. Okay, 28. Which NFT has the highest trading volume last 30 days? CryptoPunks. I mean, the volume is inflated by the price, right? Okay. Okay, so part of the question were contributed by my friend Faye, and I'll have to ask where he got the source, but I trust these checks. CryptoPunks. And 29, which coin is not in the top 5? So is not in the top 5. So is number 6. Yeah. Yeah, BNB is holding strong, number 5. And the market cap difference is not that big, to be honest. Like one is 90 billion and Solana is 76. Oh yeah, like when Trump tweets something, instantly gonna become number 5, I guess. So yeah, you're right. Yeah, actually it's for a lot of billion. Okay, last question. So execution layer rewards, including MEV tip and gas priority fee, is actually very small compared to consensus layer rewards, which means ETH issuance is pretty big still. And staking industry is like way bigger than MEV, to be honest. So yeah, like this number comes from a rated network. So if you check their website, they have a rewards distribution breakdown where it says consensus is constructing of 90% almost, and the rest are like 10% from execution, both priority fee and baseline MEV. So the answer is E. Okay, all right, so I think the stream gonna stop at this point. If anyone from the audience that are watching stream got higher points, please DM any of us and I will figure out what present we can get you. And thank you so much for watching this. And thanks Shaka for helping to stream. Bye-bye.